Hello everybody, this is Christian from Blue vs. Orange TCG, coming to you with a deck list, tier list video for the Titan 1 ATP-3 metagame. We had one for ATP-2, now we got one for ATP-3 here. This is going to be a little bit late, this is going to be more of almost like a summary of the ATP-3 format as a whole, while talking about some of the decks that really made a splash, while also talking about things to look out for June, because June is the last ATP-3 event, and it is Titan 1. But I got a friend here with me today. Would my friend like to introduce themselves after doing the sweet pop and lock earlier?
I mean, I liked it. I don't, sometimes the cold opens are hard, and just in case you didn't have the charisma that you do, and I should have assumed that you did, giving you something to play off of is generally a pretty good strategy.
It is a good strategy.
So, but my name is Richard Wyatt. I'm one of the Alpha Triumph protocols. I am a good friend of Christian's here through this lovely game that we get to play, and I am also a lover of the Titan 1 format. Yeah.
I think there are many of us out there are lovers of the Titan 1 format. I think it's widely loved out of all the formats.
I hope so. It is the most Dan, I think, has been quoted before as saying that Titan 1 is really like the ATP baby. Like that format is like our baby, right? Like Junkion was something that was kind of played in stores and like in new player events, like prior to the games like going digital and to its cancellation, and full constructed. I mean, like it's just like the way the game has been played since the beginning.
Yeah.
That as long as it wasn't sealed, and Titan 1 is really like the first foray of a competitive community into curating something that is designed for optimal competitive tournament experience, and that prioritizes deck diversity and matchup selection event to event.
Yeah, which I think is so cool. Coming from a full constructed format, most of the Transformers, and Yu-Gi-Oh! I really appreciate knowing how many decks that can win it. I mean, just take a peek at the decks that we have up here right now. There are 20 deck lists that we have here to talk about today, and frankly, I think there's more that I didn't add on here that I could have. I
think so too.
Yeah, Transformers is deck builders just dream, in my opinion, of a game.
There's so many knobs to turn.
Yeah.
Like there's so many knobs to tune, right? Like the idea that you can play characters, and that you can construct your main board in such a way. Like let's say you want to play a specific sideboard character, you can shift your supporting cast in your main board to allow for that flexibility. The ATP sideboard stratagem slot also being a big determinant as to whether or not certain strategies are more or less viable, right? I mean those things are huge. There's so many knobs to turn because you are operating on both the team lineup as well as the deck lineup as well as the flip density that you're actually. So it's not just the cards you're playing, it's cards you're flipping, it's the cards you're having in play. So I mean, it really is. It's one of the greatest puzzles I've ever had the pleasure of trying to solve.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure for me, and I'm just excited to sit here and talk about all these decks here with you today, because we just showed how much we love deck building in this game, and I think being able to sit down and actually kind of break down each tier, each deck, and where it kind of falls in terms of the metagame currently is really is also important for just keeping the metagame really healthy and showcasing what has been played and what has been doing well, and we should go over the tier list currently, what the tiers mean for that. So I mentioned this briefly before in my last Titan 1 tier list video, but just to reiterate it again, tier 1 is obviously it's the decks that see the most consistent toppings, the most consistent representation, obviously very strong decks that see a lot of play with, would you say, I don't want to say fewest weaknesses per se, but definitely their strengths definitely far outweigh a lot of their weaknesses in terms of other decks that you see in tiers. Is that kind of a correct way you would put it, Richard?
I mean, okay, so I don't know that I would determine through weaknesses, right? Yeah. I think generally when you look at a deck's tiering, right, you're talking about win rate, right? Yeah. And so I think when you talk about breaking down win rates, generally the decks that are in tier 1 have the greatest shot against an open field. So if you look at an open field, they have the fewest disadvantageous matchups in a given open field.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That is That's what I meant to say. But that's why I got Richard here to clarify my Minnesotan verbiage.
I think what you really mean is just to turn your words into bigger words, because that's all I really do.
Exactly. Listen. I am literally in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota. I don't have the possibility to do that right now.
That's not true. You just don't. I care about vocabulary more than is good, helpful. It's detrimental, to be honest with you. But
detrimental. That's a good word.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I try to keep my average syllable count up per sentence.
Mm-hmm. So going down from tier 1, we got tier 1.5. So tier 1.5 is I would characterize this as decks that are obviously have a very strong win rate, but they have matchup issues against some of the things in the broader scope of the field that keep them out of that tier 1 spot.
Yeah, I think generally when when I think of a tier 1.5 deck, as far as the easiest conceptual way to imagine them, I think tier 1.5 decks are you stand a good chance of topping, but not a very good chance of winning the event.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a very good way to put it.
Unless given a very condensed metagame.
Yeah. And just to preface this too, as we go through, we aren't saying that none of these decks have any potential to win a tournament or get top 8. I think all of these decks have a potential to at least top it in an event. But you're gonna have a harder time with some decks than other decks, as shown by this tier list, right? Which is why the decks that are selected here. Absolutely.
No. So tier 2 is next, Christian. You want to go ahead and fill them in on that one?
Sure. So tier 2, similar to is definitely a step down from tier 1.5, where their win percentages in a lot of matchups are definitely lower than a lot of other decks, but they see a lot more representation, so a lot more people are playing them, versus rogue decks, right? Or they have a strategy that does really well against some one or two of the tier 1 decks, but not against a lot of the rest of the field, but still see as a decent chunk of representational play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so think about decks that you'll see one or two, let's say an average tournament size, right, for ATP is somewhere around 32, 34 people, right? Mm-hmm. You'll see any given tier 2 deck might have 2 registered copies, right, in the event, and they'll be slightly different in the battle deck composition, something along those lines.
Yeah, I that's a good way to put it. I think that's a solid way to put it. Yeah. And then going from tier 2, we got Rogue. So Rogue is the lowest spot on our tier list. So these decks are definitely I would say Rogue is kind of a weird tier to categorize.
Right? I can take a stab at it if you want me to.
I want you to take a stab at it, as I think you'll do very
well. Okay, so I will do my best, right? So Rogue strategies typically play along axes that the major metagame does not. So they kind of exist on the far ends of the bell curve, right? They are either really good at something that is not very popular or not very prevalent. So they either they have some surprise factor to them, which is part of one of their potential to spike events is. But also they are not very good against an open field. Almost they regularly fail to pass the gatekeeper decks, things that are good against just let's see something that's untuned. There's certain decks that are popular and seen regularly that just kind of shut those out. I think also rogue decks are one of the cool things about ATP is that we run the numbers on our events when things are submitted, right? So things are classified. And let's say for the last Titan 1 event, we had 3 Overlords and 3 Menasors and 2 different versions of Perceptor with different side characters and stuff like that. And then there was an other category, and the other category was 8 decks, but none of those were the same deck, and none of those were even the same kind of deck, right? And all of those I would have classified as rogue decks.
Absolutely.
With the exception of Galaxy, who I think was just underplayed for some reason.
Yeah. But, we can talk about Galaxy about that.
We will, I promise. But so rogue decks are generally you'll almost never see more than one copy of any one of them in one of an average size tournament, unless we see things grow or get really popular. And they do have a chance to top. They really do. They even have a chance to win from time to time. But that is normally something you are really rolling the dice when you register one.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's really I really love the rogue tier personally. Like I think between all the tiers, Rogue is kind of my favorite spot to just like take a peer at, because I think a lot of people really love to bolster their creativity through the game through the Rogue like just tiering. And I think there's also just there's just so many fun decks that you can play through Rogue. And that's where like a lot of these decks that we didn't mention probably fall into, right? Like I've seen so many decks that be like, oh my gosh, that's super cool. Like a secret action based deck with Pounce and Bonsai-tron, that's like Rogue. But I've seen people play, and I think it's like a super sweet deck. Any of Smurf's decks, this is a Smurf tier right here. Like
instead of Rogue, which is called Smurf.
Smurf.
I mean, okay, so that's not that weird because, you know, in game, in like MOBA games, like League of Legends, right? Smurfing is the idea of like making an account of lower like skill registered tracked skill cap to like spike games and matches.
Yeah.
So like Smurfing with like a rogue deck is a thing that we could try and popularize. So I think given that you know our good friend Michael loves to live in that tier.
Loves to live in that tier. And you know, you gotta give him credit, man. He hasn't topped a lot of events, but he's been like there. He's been like right there. Like tiebreakers were just better, he would have been there with the Smurf tier. You can't see it right now, Richard, but I definitely just put Smurf underneath the Rogue category box in parentheses, and it's gonna stay there for the rest of the video.
I hope so. Shout out to you, Smurf.
Absolutely, we love you, buddy, fellow Minnesotan.
Okay, you want to get into the actual meat and potatoes, or?
Absolutely, I'm excited to get into this. So our first deck that we're going to be talking about today is a classic HP deck, and that is Soundwave from HP2.
Oh man. Okay, so Soundwave is one of the decks that like I really love.
Yeah.
Soundwave is really awesome because one of the things he does is I think there's a lot of skill expression in Soundwave. I think generally when you have something that is like modular, that has like mode choice, I think there's a lot of skill expression in understanding like the right paths, right? So Dan has a joke, or like joked previously, that you can tell who tested with Soundwave before an event and who just picked it up because they thought it was going to do well, by whether or not they get Rumble as their first cassette on attack with Soundwave. Because more often than not, man, the espionage one is just better.
It is. And you know what? And just to kind of preface that a little bit more, just for a little bit of Soundwave strategy here, like you don't need Rumble early game. Like you have time to pick up Rumble as like your second cassette and then actually do something with them. You often don't need a turn one, but you can use them later on. You know, there are always niche cases where you want to grab Rumble first, but oftentimes the Rat-Bat espionage is so good.
Well, and to be fair, it's really easy to like say, hey, like I'm just gonna get the 2 damage guy, because we've seen how good direct damage has been, right? Like direct damage has been a defining characteristic of winning decks since wave 1, since Armed Hovercraft entered the scene, right?
And he's
like,
one of the decks that can really do that well. Like have the deal 2 to anybody. Like he has some of the highest like ceiling direct damage potential of a lot of these decks here.
I also think Soundwave is one of those characters where, like, what deck is a Soundwave deck? Like, we could have split this up into multiple decks, right? Like, we could have talked about Soundwave Jazz, we could have talked about aggro Soundwave that Ogar's played. I mean, previously there was the Soundwave Fire Drive deck, which was chef's kiss, that was phenomenal before the banning and mission briefing.
Yep. Still decent, but not as good. Not as good in
it was still decent, but not as good. We could talk about like Soundwave decks that are trying to play some auras of dominance after ATP-3, which is something that hasn't really been explored very much.
Yeah.
And like that's just off the top of my head. Like I know that there are more than that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. You're not even talking about like that's all like the 11-7-7 configuration of teams oftentimes. We're not even talking about how like he can do 11-9-5. Like that's a whole other like spectrum of Soundwave builds. Like Soundwave is such a flexible character to build around, and he's also like one of the few like archetypes, in my opinion, that fits in, like you said, like, as an aggro build, as a control build, and frankly as like combo. Like he's also like almost like a combo based character and can be built like more efficiently into that like multiple like triggered effect plays that can do a lot of things. Like going back to Smurf and his Quake Soundwave list, that's a straight combo deck in my opinion. Like I don't think you can classify anything else as a combo deck. Like it's
the idea that like behind Smurf is that he's like taking advantage of this kind of like mid-rangey game plan that Soundwave normally plays, and trying to like reutilize these kind of like throwaway resources that Soundwave has accrued, right? And I think that that's a really cool way to like repurpose something that was otherwise really just like kind of like the Soundwave is really just the most efficient like mid-range centerpiece character who isn't Perceptor.
Yeah.
I think is like up until now. I think that's really probably the best way to describe him.
Yeah.
Because he just kind of does everything pretty well, and then that he's got so much HP.
He's got a lot of
that
HP.
too.
A lot of
that doesn't hurt.
Too. Does not hurt whatsoever.
True.
So
True.
That being said, though, I think we kind of have to put him, in my opinion, and you can totally challenge me on this one, Richard. This is why you're here.
Okay.
I think we have to put him in tier 1.5.
I do too. And I think that that's largely a format context thing.
Yeah.
I think if you look at him in a vacuum, the character's just so obviously powerful, and the decks around him are so obviously interesting. I think pairing him alongside Overkill is like a classic move and very effective, but maybe not always the right thing to do. And I think that just like right now, he just kind of does what the big boy blue decks do, a little worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. It's such a tall format, and he doesn't like. And we're gonna get to another character that plays very similarly to Soundwave that struggles with the same thing, but even worse. Where like the tall decks have such strong post board strategies for other control decks that Soundwave really doesn't have. Like he does not have the same explosive like post board capabilities that a lot of these other big blue decks have. In a format that where taller is better, right? Yep.
No arguments here. I think tier 1.5, and I'm sad he's there, and I may be playing him in this coming month's event anyway because I like Soundwave. So
I mean tier 1.5 is still good. Like I think it shows.
Yeah.
Right? I think its results show. I do think coming ATP-4 with some of the with some of the cards that's going to happen. I don't think he gets a lot of like direct support, but I think he's going to have a couple more archetypes that he could play with. And I think that's actually just going to make him a little bit better because there's going to be a little bit more. I think the format is going to be a little bit less control heavy. Yeah,
I think so too. I think that it might shift back a little bit more towards some less tall gameplay, and I think that just like format shift will largely like give him some edge.
Yep, I agree.
So let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spent so much time on our boy Soundwave.
I mean, if you and I don't accelerate this thing along, we're just going to be here for 4 hours. So
we are 100%. I see that timer already. But going on to the next deck, we do have the counterpoint to Soundwave. We have Blaster. Blaster is kind of an interesting aggro deck. I categorized it as a rogue deck before in my last tier list, and immediately the next tournament he ends up going almost undefeated in Swiss. Shout out to Team Rock and
impressively too.
Yeah,
impressively too. Like I was watching some of his matches and I was like, man, he was rolling people. And the truth is, when you hit on that turn 1 flip Soundwave or flip Blaster to bot mode and on the deploy, like some of those first turns just look absurd.
Yeah, especially now. Like used to be Blaster was always paired with Fire Drive, but often the list we've seen is paired with Fangry as a 7-drop. And Fangry starting with Bolt 2 going first with a possible Power Punch or Grenade Launcher is...
Or Erratic Lightning or Belligerence. Like
yeah, Belligerence. Any of these things.
Look, I've seen it happen, man. Turn 1 Belligerence off the flip. Oh, like turn 1 like play nothing, flip, deploy, Belligerence, swing Fangry into biggest guy, and like, well, I'm gonna take Infinity to the face. Turn 1.
That's a big swing for turn 1. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and here's one of the that I think Blaster is one of the best on the play decks in the format still. Even though like I think you can move them into this if you want to. I think that he is rogue. I think the Blaster deck is a rogue tier deck, but I still think it's one of the best on the play decks in the entire format because it has a really high first turn ceiling, and then it's always wider than its opponent, like almost every single time, right? So it will, like, if it goes first, swings into your big guy, and then has Blaster left as the last attacker into your big guy again. Like there's a bunch of games where if you're on the draw against Blaster, your key piece will just not live to see the wheel.
Yeah, it's super true. It is super true. And I think, just to clarify too, real quick, in my opinion, another reason why to put Blaster in Rogue is also because like the metagame that we're in right now, like because it is heavier on the tall spectrum, like not just control but tall decks too. Like Blaster just suffers against like narrow decks because of the way his flipping and deploying in width works. It just makes it really difficult. Like he's an aggro deck that actually struggles against like Galaxy Thrust.
I mean, I can throw this all the way back to the EI days. So, like, I registered at EI. I eventually am going to stop talking about this, I promise, time-wise. But, like, I registered a 2-tall deck, Jetfire Aimless, right? Like, the whole premise of the deck was, like, you can attack me 60 times, but you're going to deal me 6 damage, right? And like, the whole premise there was, like, so because the way Blaster works, like, his first flip deploys, and then he needs to flip back down and flip back to deploy again, and just being too tall against him with reasonable defenses on both of your characters is going to mean that the flip economy of that deck is really adversely affected, and that it's incredibly taxed if they're not going to draw something like an escape route or something to pick it up off the green. So I think it's important to note.
Yeah, I agree 100%. All right. So next next deck we got Aerial Bots. So Aerial Bots is kind of an interesting deck. So beginning of the tier list I made for them before for ATP2, I put Aerial Bots as like tier 1.5 early in the metagame. I predicted these guys to do really well because the support they got in ATP2 is like you read the text, it's like really strong, right? Like Superion gets to deal an extra 1 damage with direct damage is like that's pretty wild. His support, the battle cards he gets is really good, but I mean, I'm just putting it here right now. I mean, he's just a rogue deck. He just isn't good. He's really bad.
And so the problem here is pretty simple. Like, big singular attacks are good into him.
Yeah.
And the whole metagame has access to big singular attacks because of 2 cards, Master Metallicato and Belligerence, and those cards are insanely good into our friend here. Belligerence especially, right? Like, Belligerence is good into all the combiners because, like, the fact it applies the whole turn, like, don't get me wrong there, but just really so, we're talking about Aerial Bots here. Like, Superion...
Mr. 1 defense Superion.
Yeah, Mr. One base defense, right? And like, he loved seeing the printing of Dad, don't get me wrong. And even though he's rogue definitely right now, I do think the long range volley printing that's coming up in ATP4, spoiled by our good friend Zero, over on the Facebook and on Teletran1.net. Shout out to that wonderful deck building website.
Fantastic.
But I think long range volley does a lot to help him, especially because like, maybe the card that is actually the best against Aerial Bots pre-combine is the menace of the metagame, or previous metagame, Magnetic Dysfunction Ray. Right? Yeah. Mag Ray, even with the ATP2 configuration where you've only got 4 bots on board, it's still just 8 damage.
8 damage is 8 damage, man. You just can't do anything about it.
It's unbelievable. That like eats the whole ATP strat and then some, right? And like, that's just like, it's just so hard to recover from even one. And I can't tell you how many times I'm like, well, I think I'm in a really good setup. My hand was pretty good. They don't have Mag Ray. Like, I'm looking clean, and they're like, Mag Ray, and I go,
that's it. Yeah. Like, oh well, I've literally lost like a turn and a half almost. So it's just like a single battle card being played, which is wild. And it's not like yeah. I think there's a lot we could talk about with Superion. But I do agree with you that I think he I think with long range volley, like, just the fact, like, another good blue-black that actually has like good offensive capabilities for Superion is gonna bring him. I think he's gonna go up to tier 2 with it. I think it's definitely.
I think so.
Play.
I think that, plus I think the metagame getting a little wider and a little less like narrow in terms of like the actual like character configuration, I think is going to be good for him as well. Because I do think Superion is pretty good into rogue decks as well.
Yeah, he is. He is.
So like in a wide open format, I think he's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and that's where he saw most plays too. Is like early on.
Yeah. Also, we forgot one more thing. If there's ever a lot of jazz in the metagame, you just literally can't play him because you can't.
You're now pre ATP Aerial Bots again. It's like, oh no, I didn't want to be this again.
No.
Rough.
Yeah, it is pretty rough. But I've seen some really interesting takes on the deck building, and people still trying to iterate it. Like, because Superior's one of those characters people love, and so like they're going to play him still some too, which like I more than respect. And like I've really liked some of the like technology that's been adopted by like some of the people who picked him up more recently, like nanotech in the server. I think they've done some really cool things with him and had a lot of success. So
he has.
Yeah. I think let's move on. We got 20 of these things. Okay, so Darkmount Tanks. Darkmount Tanks is up next. And Darkmount, not just himself, but also the Straxus Lives ATP-1 stratagem, I think is important to mention here. Like that's a big piece of this character, making him much more survivable. So this is generally a deck that just kind of, depending on the build, is either focusing on tank synergy specifically, or is focusing on leader synergy specifically, right?
Yep.
So you can also, I think, it makes a deck that makes great use of Valiant Effort. It is one of the decks that leans most heavily on Pocket Processor, which is just an inherently powerful card, right? Like it's one of the few decks where I'm like, yeah, just play 2. Like just like stock play 2, do not play less than 2. It's really, really good for you.
Absolutely.
And also, any deck that gets to play Hunker Down is good. Because Hunker Down is just... It's maybe the best tribal card that isn't an untap.
Absolutely.
I think it probably is.
It's so good. It's just so much. And like, also, like this is a very... Like, obviously, like, Darkmount Tanks, this is a very, like, open-ended, like, deck here in the tier list. Because we've seen so many variations of this, like what you were saying, Richard. Like the fact that like we now have so many just medium-sized value tanks that can be paired with Darkmount. So we got like Impactor. You can play Darkmount Impactor, and you got like a 6 or 7. You got a 6-drop that you can play.
Yep.
Like that's a team. That's a team that we've seen play and have seen success. You can play Bonsai-tron and really lean into the leader thing, like you said. Also being a Decepticon. You can even, you can go, we've seen success, early ATP sets with Darkmount and Demolisher and his ATP-1 stratagem, and really leaning into like that really aggressive tanks list as well. There's just so many like value tanks. Like I guess this is almost more so what this deck is more than Darkmount tanks. It's value tanks is really kind of how I would describe it. And
I agree.
Yeah.
I think generally as well, right? We've seen through-eye decks be good basically the entirety of the history of the game, but like ATP-3 has issued forth a couple of these 9-9X decks, or these like 9-8-8 decks, right? And I think the Darkmount Tanks is a great example of one of these archetypes where you just kind of are trying to have 3 relevant attackers. It's like basically, it's the base operating principle of the deck construction from... You know, it's one of the reasons why, like, I talked about Valiant Effort being so good, right? And we talk about, like, Composite Armor being such a value card, right? Because these characters who are, like, if every one of them is valuable in combat, and combat is the most important resource in the Transformers TCG, which I still would argue it is, right? Like, if those are the things that we are stating are, like, base operating principles, then these kind of, like, what if every attack was relevant decks, when they ask that question, they just get to stand up to a lot. And some of these like medium star characters, you know, with a lot of the attempts of ATP-3 with the 8 and 6 star and 9 star slots just getting filled out more, we've seen a lot of like innovation around this concept. So
a lot of success.
Where would you put this deck on the tier list?
So I think it has like a... I would not call it a tier 1.5 deck. I don't think it has the win percentage that it necessarily needs. I think it's pretty close. Like, I would call this like a tier 2 deck and going up, in my opinion. Like, every time a new set comes out, like, inherently, this deck just gets better. Like, every time.
It's a good stuff deck.
It is a huge...
It's a good stuff deck, right? So, like, every time that, like, ATP prints some battle card that is just like, hey, this is, like, good on rate. Right? Yep. Or, hey, this is like an effect that exists before, but it has slightly better pips. Like, or you know, or instead of, you know, here's this card that you were already playing, but instead of drawing you 1 card, it draws you 2 cards, and you scrap a card. Right? Like it's always going to iterate higher because it's just a good stuff deck. It's a value deck, like you were talking about. Yep. I think tier 2 is a great place to put it. Like, I do not think it's a rogue deck. I think it's too good. I think its win percentage is too high to qualify it as a rogue deck. Yeah. And like, I'll even say this, like, I've seen this deck. I have personally experienced this deck beating Menasor when I was the Menasor pilot, like more than once.
I have too.
And I think basically any deck that like shows that kind of capability as its ceiling, like if you can find a way to like deck build it in a way or construct it in a way that like really just brings up the floor to match, then I think that you really have something on your hands. And this is a deck that I wouldn't be shocked to see do well in a bunch of tournaments coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So following that, we got a deck that I think you can speak a lot about, Richard Wyatt, especially recently. We got Galaxy Prime. We do.
So
yeah, you take it off, man. You take it off.
Okay, so Galaxy Prime has been good since the day that he was spoiled. It's just the truth. Dude has so much health and so much attack and so many utility slots. I mean, the power of Energy Pack cannot be argued. The power of Matrix of Leadership, especially in multiples, cannot be argued. Crush is really, 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 really good. Yeah. Why is it back in the fold? Like, why? You know, it's kind of been hovering around tier 2, maybe Rogue, for the last couple of like waves. I would even argue, right? Like, even wave 5 and ATP 1 and then ATP 2. Mm-hmm. And I think that ATP 3 it really kind of came back to the forefront and is a real contender again. That's because of 2 cards, right? So.
I'm gonna say 3 because I think I know what the 2 cards are, but I'm gonna argue a third one.
Okay. Well, we'll let you get to that one after I make my 2 cases, right?
Yes.
The first one is Valiant Effort.
Mm-hmm.
Valiant Effort is absolutely nuts with any ranged leader who is your centerpiece.
Yeah.
Right. Or in any deck that has multiple leaders. In a range, at least one is ranged. So because it is ranged. Because he's a leader and he's ranged in both modes. That means that no matter when you do it, when you hit it, when you play it, it is +3 on him. It's a leap into battle, and it's a ping somewhere. And it doesn't have to go to the same spot as who you want to attack with him. Yep. Especially because most of your game plan around Galaxy decks is like, how do I make my Galaxy attack the most effective possible? Mm-hmm. Right, or the least mitigating, right? And so just being able to go, okay, here's +4. On my attack is insane. Being able to go, here's +3, ping your guy, like Sturdy Javelin, like combine that with him, like KO your guy out of combat.
Yikes.
Those were all really, really good, effective, modular ways to just buff up the thing you're already most about, right? Mm-hmm. So just like that card allows him to become a little bit more focused. I played 2 Valiant Efforts in my deck that I took to. I didn't think I lost the finals. I don't actually remember if it was the finals or the semifinals. I want to say it was Stefan. I want to say it was the finals, actually. Yeah, I think it was the finals.
Yeah, because you lost to Stefan in the finals and last round of Swiss, too.
Yes, I did. He beat me both times.
Yeah. Just to point that out.
I know. Thank you for rubbing it in. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So I should have played 3. That was like my first thought about 3 rounds in was like, man, I wish I had a 3rd Valiant Effort. And people were gawking at how many white pips I had in my Galaxy deck. Mm-hmm. Because I think the number was like 9, and I think I was considering a 10th white pip before I submitted my deck.
That's a lot of whites.
So here's the... Okay, so yes, but also, Galaxy wants to play a lot of whites. The more white pips that are in your deck, like you're inherently a mixed pip deck. Mm-hmm. So you want whites because they like just increase your functional density of your actual attack and defense affecting pips. On top of the fact that the more whites you have, the better your odds of triggering his attack ability in bot mode are. Yep. Like he just wants to play a lot of white pips. You already have like multiple cards that actually just singularly trigger his ability to play one of your flipped upgrades. Mm-hmm. And just being able to like hit whites and go, oh well, you know, I flipped my handheld blaster and you know my my white pip and end hostilities and oh belligerence, cool, awesome. Like I'll play my handheld blaster and I'll make my next trigger like easier to find or something. Like it's a really, really easy thing to do to use that and just like functionally increase your ability to hit that trigger. Yeah. The second card that he got was Dad, and all of the decks that like have singularly important defenses got Dad, right? It wasn't just him, right? But he was one of the characters that really, really loved playing alongside Night Racer. Night Racer plus Dad, because the tough enables you to see more of your icons, and because you had so many white pips in the deck, like inherently just meant that he was on average hitting the 4 cap almost every single time. It was like a guaranteed +3 and almost always a +4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And so that in and of itself was just an absolutely fantastic thing. I think I also only played 2 Dads, and I think that was wrong. I think I should have played 3 of that card as well. I think that card was better than End Hostilities in the deck, and you can quote me on that.
Yeah. I think that's true for a lot of big blue decks too.
What's the third card?
And this is actually one that did not. This is not so much a card that came out, but a card that went away, and that was the banning of Sky Shadow Sync for Titan 1 as well. I think that was huge because Sky Shadow was his mortal enemy for Galaxy Prime. I mean, it was.
I've
yikes.
never seen Galaxy beat Sky Shadow. When I say never, I don't mean like, oh, it's a 90-10 matchup. I mean, it is a 100-0 matchup.
It is bad.
In my experience.
I have beaten in the first Titan 1 Open event playing Galaxy Prime. I had beaten a Sky Shadow in top 8.
Wow.
Like, it was.
That is really impressive.
I know, but I played 4 Sky Shadows and I lost to the other 3. Like, without like, it was just not even close. The other 3, and I don't even think it was like, the thing that won me the game was sheer luck. Like, I mean, I hit the trigger every time I needed it. He flipped poorly on attack. I flipped great on defense. All those games, it was literally pure luck. It was the 1% that let me win that game. But it is Sky Shadow is the hardest matchup for Galaxy Prime, hands down. Hands down.
Well, I think Sky Shadow leaving like completely threw the whole thing into flux, and I also think that I mean, like look how many things we talked about so far that are Autobot decks really so far, right? I mean, to be fair, we're 5 in or 4 or 5 in, right? We talked about Galaxy, Aerial Bots, and Blaster, who are all Autobot decks. Blaster doesn't give a crap about Sky Shadow. He's wider, and he hits just as hard.
He don't.
Right?
Yeah, he don't
Dark
care.
Mount, like Aerial Bots is never going to be in a million, billion, zillion years. No chance.
No.
Even with long range volley, it's just not going to happen. And Galaxy is just like, the only thing it cares about is it's one gigantic Autobot who just gets absolutely housed by Sky Shadow.
Yeah.
Like, so I mean, none of these decks would be things we were talking about if Sky Shadow Sync was here. None of them would even have been on the list though. Maybe Blaster.
Maybe Blaster. Yeah, maybe Galaxy Prime, but I like barely for sure. So
I'd put Galaxy. I think Galaxy is good against the good decks. So if it's a qualified matchup percentage, right? Like I think it's good against the good decks. I think it's great because you have the thrust sideboard option, and you can now play Aura of Dominance as your extra star as well, which I think is really important.
Huge.
Because that's actually another card that's really good because it means your sideboard strategy is even better. But I think it's naturally good into the bigger boy blue decks as well. So I think like it's good against some of the stuff that is already at the top of the metagame. I think that alone warrants its position as a tier 1.5 thing, even if it's pretty bad into the aggro strategies.
Yeah.
So I'd put it as a tier 1.5 is where I'd put him, pretty squarely actually.
I'd agree. I think it's really close to a tier 1 deck, but just because like even though like aggro is in, we'll talk about this too a little bit more. Like aggro is like an archetype that actually isn't seeing a whole lot of play in the metagame currently, but like when it does see play, going Galaxy Prime into aggro is honestly super tough because like you said, your main sideboard strategy that Galaxy Prime kind of tends to lean on often in metagames like this just doesn't work, and it's really bad against it. So you have to play really a lot. Bad. You have to play a lot harder against it. And speaking of aggro decks, we got our first ATP-3 aggro deck here with Wreckers. Wreckers is a really unique deck because this is a deck that it's kind of similar to ATP-2 Soundwave to a certain extent, where it has a lot of interesting configurations to it. Like Impactor is 9 times out of 10 the centerpiece character for Wreckers because he's like the Lord. He's almost like a record Lord because he gives bonuses to all the other to the damage Wreckers.
Well, he is a leader, so he's a record leader as well.
He is a leader. A lot of the records are leaders like Cup, but Cup isn't often paired with Impactor. It's mainly Wrecker Wheeljack from ATP-3 as well. And then this is similar to like the value tanks list, right? Where it's a 9, 9, and 6 or 7 drop spot. We've seen them pair. We've seen those two pair with Sea Spray, with Fangry. We've seen success with a lot with just pairing good old Fangry into the bold strategies. And it's a deck that has seen a lot of play. People love playing Wreckers, and for good reason. It's a fun deck.
It's fun.
Super
playing
fun
Wreckers
deck.
is fun. Like your flips all matter, right? You get access to some cards that are really cool that other people don't really get. Like Harpoon Gun is just awesome.
Harpoon Gun's wild.
Playing it feels awesome.
Yeah.
Never a Dull Moment is a really uniquely powerful card, and ATP-3 Wheeljack just turning it on like by himself, turning both halves on by itself is really, really good. Especially in low resource games where people's hands are smaller.
It's also got like it's got something that a lot of aggro decks can't do very well, other than like value tanks, where it could splash a couple blues in the list and have it be pretty okay.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good at splashing a couple blues. I think like it's because you have natural tough, on your actual impactor, right? And I think that like some of the configurations can play Heroic Spotlight as well. I think Matrix of Leadership is a card that's just like naturally like pretty solid like on your team, as well as the fact that you can do things like you can find windows to play Matrix. That's one of the biggest problems with Matrix, by the way, is that sometimes it's just hard to justify playing it over other really solid upgrades. It's hard. It's not that the card is bad ever. It's just often the second best option. And because of the way that ATP-3 Wheeljack works and his flip to alt mode happens, sometimes you will spike upgrades off of this ability, and then you will formulate turns where it makes sense for you to deploy a Matrix of Leadership onto your impactor and thus buff your team additionally. And that is really powerful. Just being able to make Matrix of Leadership a little bit better of a card is in and of itself just like a really strong thing to be doing. And Hostilities is great in this deck, even though you are largely orange. Energon Axe is basically free.
Yeah,
so
it's so free. So free.
For those of you who don't know how this works, so Impactor is alt mode ability, allows you to basically kind of get a pseudo Camion crash. So you can, at the beginning of your turn, you can do 1 damage to one of your wreckers, and if you do, you can do 2 damage to an enemy that has at least 10 damage already on him. So if you've got somebody who's like close to dead, or a combiner who just soaks up all the damage from his own guys, like you can ping him down using the health of your own guys as kind of like a half resource. But even if they don't have a guy who's got that damage on him, you can still do the damage to your team, which just lets you be like, oh, well, I want to play an Energon X on my Wheeljack this turn, so I'm going to deal a damage to a Wheeljack.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'll just do this. And Energon X, here we go.
Oh, look, Energon X, it fits magically on him. And that's pretty cool. That's a pretty interesting to like exploit to go along as well. And one of the reasons why you have occasionally seen him played alongside the much worse wrecker option, Cup.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it definitely is the best time Cup has ever been relevant, but it's still not quite enough. He struggles so much. The poor guy. I know. The poor guy.
Just so no health.
No health, man. No health, and can't. Yeah. If he was just like 12 health, maybe. I don't even know.
Or if he was just 6 stars, like he's not. I mean, he's just got worse stats than Fengri.
Yeah.
And he's an Autobot, so.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Cup aside, I feel like Wreckers have a lot going for them in terms of like representation, character ability, battle card support, and overall like team synergy. But I still think it's a tier 2 deck currently. I still just think it is. I agree, but I would argue that Wreckers is an archetype that's on the rise. Being that I have a little bit of advanced knowledge, I can tell you that they are getting additional support in ATP-4. Yep.
Coming out soon, right? And then on top of that, like Wreckers is one of those things that the protocols themselves have really taken under their wing to try and develop further as a theme, as a trait, as a team, as like a gameplay style, right? And so they are going to continue to receive support. If you want to hitch your wagon to Wreckers, I do not think it's a bad choice. Like, I think that Wreckers are maybe even going to get like Junkion support in the future. You've already got Whirl. You already got like Neverwoman's already like a card that you can play there. Just like, it's one of those things where Wreckers is a theme that stands to get better over time. I think that's important to keep in mind when you're looking at stuff like this.
Yeah, and just to really quick, because we have been on Wreckers for a little while now, we should move on. But Wreckers also is like a battle deck. Like the battle deck's kind of hard to build. Like it's actually like if you look at like 3 Wreckers lists, there's like a lot of similarities. But then there's like all these like tech options that people are teching into the Wreckers list. There's like
play 2 turbo boosters and a single field comm and. To work with him, and I'm playing 2 Matrix of Leadership because I can only really put it on Impactor, and
I'm mainboarding in Hostilities. I'm mainboarding Dad. Like there's heavier secret action builds. There's so much build diversity to Wreckers, where it's also like it's tier 2 now because of like it hasn't seen a lot of results. But I also think like even in this metagame, like maybe if someone like has figured out the puzzle of Wreckers, it could jump up to tier 1.5 with enough like tournament tops as well with the right build.
I agree. I got to play a really fun Wreckers deck in the last one-day event. I got to play Wreckers as an OA deck, and first of all, the backup plan was really just like, you're an aggro deck. You just like swing for damages because Master Metallicato in your deck is bonkers and you have like an inherent bold on a bunch of your guys, and I think there's really something there, so I think that's something we could watch out for too. I also think that, like, you know, a natural fit alongside the 2 9-stars would be the 7-star B, who has opportunism to come with him. We should know because we spoiled on your channel. Opportunism is a white-black. That's pretty good for OA. That's all I'm saying.
Pretty good for OA. Pretty good for like Pierce heavy record variants too, because like they also have like the niche to be a Pierce heavy deck if they want it to be, and that'd be a fantastic 100%. Card too.
Yeah, I mean, you get native Pierce from Harpoon Gun, you're like good at playing Dad, like you're more than happy to play like fight for positions and stuff like that, like...
Yeah, they have so much going for them. And, you know, so that's Wreckers. And going, it's kind of convenient that we just started talking about Pierce. We have, on the screen, you have a picture of Horrible. This represents 4 wide Pierce as an archetype. Yep. So any 4 characters that are really efficient on getting high orange black Pierce black pip like on flips type of like teams, right?
Of everything we've talked about, like I think this is probably the one you just spend the least amount of time on.
Yeah, I agree, because
there's been so much time spent on these decks previously.
Yeah, I'm just putting it real quick, especially I'm putting it real quick in tier 1.5. Just slapping it in there. I think it's like I think it's a great anti-meta choice for the current control format. You know, we've seen Olgar made 3rd place recently with a 4 wide Pierce list. You know, it does great against, you know, a lot of the big boy blue. Struggles against aggro, but also like you can tech it to have a heavier aggro slant to it to make up for that. Notably,
of the big boy blue decks, this is one of the few like aggro decks that has less game into Galaxy Prime, because Galaxy Prime's primary defensive condition is just overwhelming you with raw HP totals.
Yeah, and Pierce does not like that. Pierce decks don't like that.
Exactly. All right, tier 1.5. You could argue it's maybe even tier 1 right now, but probably on the move down.
Yep.
Next,
we got Seekers. Seekers with Starscream. This is always a tough one for me to talk about. So last tier list we talked about Seekers being rogue deck because they just lacked a lot of like the efficiency and like just like pure like, I don't even know, like it's hard to say like pure synergy. Like they have so much synergy, but like what they wanna do didn't quite translate to really making a splash in the metagame. And I kind of hate to, and I really hate to say it, because Starscream is such a cool character. I think he adds so much to Seekers, but I think he's still rogue. I think the deck is still a rogue type of archetype currently.
I agree. I don't really think there's that much to say to it. I think like Seekers is going to get more support in ATP-4 as well. Seekers and Wreckers are kind of two of the things that like the protocols really like tried to focus on from like just team construction and development. And they will continue to receive support, right? And they'll continue to receive stuff like Dogfight, which is an awesome addition to the archetype.
It's a great card. Great card.
Right. But like there's more coming down the pipeline. But all I can really say right now is that like, you know, they're rogue. They are rogue. They are going to get better over time. I think they might even be a little bit better in like a metagame that's kind of aggressive, believe it or not, because I don't think many other guys are one-shottable early in the game.
Like
I think it's like it's harder to one-shot them, right?
Yeah,
I think that's actually pretty important.
Yeah, to leverage that, because I did want to mention that too. Like I think because like I actually think Seekers is actually like one of the few like 3 wide orange decks that's really good against wide aggro, solely for the fact that Starscream, like Starscream's bot mode ability to, when flipping a blank on attack, to do a carpet, you know, do AoE damage 1 to every non-seeker, is super good against wide aggro decks, and you can actually tech your deck to really like just really face that like really heavily, and you have all this innate brave to keep like pressure off of Starscream anyway. You get you get like advantage over the course of the game as your characters die, and you can really build your deck to be this wide AoE style of deck. Like you can play photon bombs as blanks in your deck that you can grab back with Dirge's Revenge, will trigger the Starscream's bot mode ability on attack, and if you play it, I mean it's just 2 across the board to a wide aggro team. That's huge. And then you could play Dogfight as well to move 2 to 3 to another guy. Like I think that is where this deck really shines, and this is just not the metagame for it.
No. I think I'd keep this one in the back of your mind, but I'd probably just slap it in the rogue tier and move on to the next one.
Yep. And what the next one it is. We got Menasor, and I'm slapping this boy right up to tier 1.
Yeah, you can just
Right
throw
away.
that at the front of tier 1 if you want to.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty hard to argue anything other than Menasor is the best deck.
Yeah. Hands down. Hands down.
I think its matchup against the field is really solid. I think the craziest part about it is I think you can play Menasor 3 ways, and each of them is totally viable. I think you can play, so you can play the originally popularized like tempo version with lots of pump spells. I think in this current metagame that might be the best one, because I think that's probably of the versions the one that's the best into Overlord specifically.
Yeah.
I think Overlord is probably like kind of reigning over things right now. I think you can, in a world that's more like Full Con that like really focuses on like these resources, like being efficient with your resources. I think the discard version that actually was the mirror in the finals of the last Full Con event that we had. I think that version is another one you could play, although I think it's really just not that well set up in T1 because the format's about different things.
Yeah.
And there's also the wacky one, a little more off the wall one, OA. I think you can play OA Menasor, and it's just not that hard to assemble. You're a deck that already wants to play orange and blue, so you're already like inherently mixed. Master Metallicado is really good in your deck. Like Wedge Formation is okay in your deck. You have a lot of white pips that you can just kind of tech, and you're naturally, because you have so many cards in hand, you generally are playing like a high density of greens to filter them through. So like some of your pip density is just always high when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yeah. And it has a good secondary, like, backup plan. If OA doesn't work, he just smashes your face.
Right. Yeah. He also has the unique capability of just being able to go counter-espionage into OA.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
That is back-breaking when assembled. So, that is something that's really cool and unique that he gets access to. And you can just play Decepticon Crown. Card's not that bad. Like, don't worry about it. You're fine.
Yeah. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Menasor is also, I truly believe this, moving down the tier list with the release of ATP-4 coming out.
I agree. I agree 100%.
We've seen the Legend
mechanic alone. Mechanic alone of Legends will just do that. Yeah, like the taller decks, like swinging into Legends, like they will just not be as effective. Like there's going to be against wider teams functionally. There's a lot of hosing inefficiency that will be like gone through here, and I think just like the damage cap ability is so powerful. I think the energy transfer tech that works with Legends once they've arisen is really powerful, because just having like the bigger, better guy for longer is really solid. Like, by this point, by the time of the release of this video, people should have already seen Ghost Starscream as a legend and Rodimus Prime. Yeah.
Both of whom I think are just so good into like these big, tall strategies like this.
Yeah. Ghost Starscream, especially against Menasor, being able to turn off his sturdy, like, is huge. And just being a good Pierce deck is beautiful. Let me tell you, is pure unadulterated karma playing Ghost Starscream into Menasor, just from me playtesting. Yeah.
Ghost Starscream just go in there in the back like, you can't touch me.
Pretty much. Literally in the back spitting spitballs. That's literally Ghost Starscream in a nutshell.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's so fun.
Yeah. So that's Menasor.
Let's move on.
Yeah, that's Menasor.
Yeah. Menasor's good if you want to do well. Menasor's a great choice. You can do them like 4 different ways. No. I don't think you can really do much mixing of the strategies, though, is the one thing I think I'll say before we go. Like, I don't think like hybridizing the discard and the tempo versions is very good. I don't think hybridizing the tempo and the OA version is very good. I don't think hybridizing the discard and the OA version is very good. I think you need to pick a path and stay on it.
Yeah, because the fact that he draws so much and you play 2 cards, you can just make one strategy so consistent that immediately once you start making an inconsistent, like having that, it just creates so much more inconsistencies in your deck, and you just don't need it. Like, you just don't need it to do well.
You don't.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we've got. I'll do for you what you did for me with Galaxy here. Fort Maxx. Now, Christian, I hear that Fort Maxx is a card that you have played once, maybe twice, over the course of its existence. Yeah, there he is, right next to your computer.
There he is. He's always here with me, always protecting me. Yeah, I love Fort Maxx. Fort Maxx is like, just speaking personally really quick, Fort Maxx is kind of like my baby deck. Like, this is like the deck I'm always like most proud of looking back on my time playing the Transformers TCG, just because like it was a deck like when it first came out people weren't really too high on, because it was like, he's just a one tall guy, and when he does stuff, he smacks really hard, but he dies so quickly. And I think like what's so interesting about Fort Maxx to me is like, you know, he's kind of a boring deck to play to some people in terms of strategy, because he has one strategy. You attack the biggest threat with Fort Maxx. You try to get him off the board, and when Cerebros comes, you can grind the rest of the game out because the rest of the field is kind of tattered at that point. It's the same strategy. You're not really deviating in it. But what makes Fort Maxx so exciting to play, and frankly really strong, both in this metagame and just in general, is the fact that he is a one-tall deck that can recur things from the scrap, and like consistently too. Like Cerebros being able to grab back any or just about any triggered ability upgrade is huge. Being able to, you know, Crushing Size is a card that has seen such an increase in play in this metagame because of like Aura Dominance, Energy Pack, Pocket Processor, and knowing that if Crushing Size gets in the scrap early, knowing that like it's scary to ever play Energy Pack because it just may not happen because he can just get rid of it like for free, just from sheer fact of there's like, oh, I flipped on attack, I'll grab Crushing Size and blow up your Energy Pack. Oh, you died now. Or being able to, like, on the swing, if you have 1 health left, because it's pretty common to have, you know, only 1 or 2 health left when attacking into Cerebros, and he procs and hits an armed hovercraft, and, oh, attack's done, you're dead.
Yep.
You're able to recur that.
Attack order into Cerebros is really important. Yeah. And if you want just like a testimony as to, hey, is it good to play things out of my scrap pile? Just remember that recently, I Don't Believe in Destiny was banned in Titan 1, right? Yeah. So like full power ATP-1 Jetfire is literally not playable because of its power concerns in Titan 1.
Yeah.
It's very good. Trust me.
It's so good. And like there's so many weird combos you can do. Like it's a deck that like I've always, you know, I loved it. You know, I could talk about Fort Maxx forever, and I have a deck profile to talk about Fort Maxx and a lot of the combos you can do with at least the deck that I've been playing a lot, that I've found great success with. I actually think it's so close to a tier 1 deck because it has such a good matchup against every blue deck like in existence. Like every blue deck, every blue deck fears running across Fort Maxx. You know, it has such a good matchup against Galaxy Thrust. It has a pretty okay matchup against Menasor. It depends on the version. Like the hand attack version, it does very well against because Fort Maxx honestly just does not care about having a hand. Like, no,
you know, couldn't care less.
Could not care less. The OA one is probably like the second best. It's kind of weird because like that one's a really weird strategy, but definitely second best matchup. Tempo one is definitely tough to play against, but I mean like it still has legs. Just being this big tall guy into, you know, going first and wiping drag strip off the board, even if you don't get to do the 2 across the board, is like game winning.
Hold on, I think it's important to note this here. Any deck that can go first and wipe drag strip off, just like poof, just like he done. They don't get to draw the 2 cards. They didn't get to flip and accelerate because of Motor Master's ability. Your matchup into Menasor it looks unbelievably good when you get to do that.
Good. Yeah, like
right.
The almost like the reliance on drag strip is huge for Menasor. But
yeah. I mean, it's so hard to win games with Menasor when you miss on your attack with drag strip. It's one of the reasons where like, so there is a common play line with Menasor where like you will hold, if you're going first and handheld blasters in your opening hand, you will hold him back for the first attack so you can play a handheld blaster on the guy and basically guarantee that you get to trigger and draw 2 cards.
Yeah.
So you will not be discarding a handheld blaster to pick up greens in your blue deck because it's more important to hit with drag strip.
Yeah. And that's also like a good point in Fort Maxx against Menasor because they have to attack out so early. Like they just may not have the ability to hold back drag strip and hope it like procs. Like they just kind of have to hope and like hope for the flips. And, you know, they have a good shot, but like the odds are still like not always there, right? But you know, going back to like tiering, like I want to put Fort Maxx in tier 1. I think he has such a good matchup in the field, but like there's one glaring problem with Fort Maxx.
It's two.
Two glaring problems. Belligerence and hostilities. Belligerence completely turns off Cerebros for the whole turn. Like Cerebros is built around the idea of getting force fields back and living through that, or grabbing armed hovercrafts back to blank attacks. Like it lives and dies by that strategy, and a late game belligerence will absolutely end it. Belligerancing like Fort Maxx like isn't actually like, it sucks, but it's not like game breaking. Like a soon enough belligerence in Cerebros will actually lose the game. Like you just gotta scoop and just go to game 2 at that point. That's how real it is. Or even just like hand hostilities, right?
Yeah, I mean that too. I mean it's like, and here's the other thing too. So the one of the things about Fort Maxx, right, is in an HP meta game, Fort Maxx will never win 2 events in a row. That is my honest opinion. Is you will never win two events in a row because it'll win one, and the next event people will have the full complement of belligerence and hostilities between their side and main boards, and you'll see an uptick in Jazz and Here's the Thing in sideboards.
Yeah.
And Jazz and Here's the Thing literally say you cannot trigger on attacks for both Fort Maxx and Cerebros. He is just a nightmare to kill. And, like, killing Jazz on those early turns is really hard because getting Pierce on your guy to get past the 2 damage ceiling ability is not an easy task. So,
yeah, because you can't play Noble's Blaster. You actually play, you play Lock on Laser in Fort Maxx to deal with Jazz. Like, you have to play Lock on Laser to get rid of it.
Or a recent addition, the Howitzer.
Howitzer. Yeah, Howitzer 2. Howitzer 2. Yep. Yeah. It just has. It has a lot of no. It has a lot of no answer cards to it.
It has a lot of things that, like, basically, like, when you register it for the event, like, largely you can go, okay, I'm gonna do this well or not well in the event, and you can pretty much tell from the beginning, which is why I think it kind of earns that 1.5 spot.
Yeah, high 1.5 too, though. Like, I think, like, for the reasons we said, it is obviously strong. It's gonna stay strong for a long time. And it's just gonna be like, it's just gonna be random. He's gonna be the weird uncle that shows up for the party, smashes everything, and just leaves. You know, because no one wants him. He's just that type of deck.
Okay, the next time you register Fort Maxx, you have to call it Weird Uncle.
Weird Uncle. Yeah, I can do that.
Weird
Easy
Uncle.
peasy.
You got it. T1 Weird Uncle. Okay. So I think Fort Maxx King of 1.5 decks, and we'll just move on to the next one.
Yep.
Which is actually our next one is one I would argue is another tier 1.5 deck.
Agreed.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
And that is a combiner, Wave 4 Omega Supreme, and an ATP strat Unbreachable. The second 2-star strat the ATP's produced after anti-air battery.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Really, really good stratagem, but just like, I don't know if you've ever seen Unbreachable play against like a blaster deck or even just wreckers.
Anything with 25 oranges.
And anything with like 22 oranges and up, you're less than 50% to win by like a decent amount. And you can absolutely like make it through, but it's really rough. Unless you can get like an early armor that stays on your brave on your now brave base.
There's one way I've always used to describe like Unbreachable, and like in the beginning there was a lot of people concerned like how strong this card was going to be, because it's very strong. The text
strong.
box is hugely value, but like the one thing,
brave and sturdy is no joke.
Drawing a card every battle is no joke. With extra health, it's not like, there is no question that this is like extremely powerful. But the problem is it still suffers from a lot of the weaknesses of Mega Supreme. It sucks against Orange. It really sucks against Pierce, but it does really good against Control. The one thing the stratagem really does, it doesn't really change the strategy of a Mega Supreme at all. It just makes his matchups against everything a little bit better. It makes his Control matchup better. It was already good, so it makes it really good. And then it took his pretty much unwinnable Orange and Orange-Black matchup to very bad. That's how much it gets it bad. It's not that much better, honestly. It's tough to say.
Okay. That is not an unfair thing to say, but man, that just hurts so bad.
I'm sorry, it's true though.
Look at all the power on this, and it took this matchup from unwinnable to very bad.
Yeah,
it moved it from a 0 to a 1.
The brain power you have to produce, the hamster wheeling you have to do for your brain in an orange matchup with the Mega Supreme is honestly almost not even worth the effort and energy to play, because it takes so much God, do I spend this upgrade now? I'm gonna get hit for so much damage next turn. That's the base never lasts very long, And to preface, we say all this, we're talking kind of bad about the Mega Supreme stratagem. It's very good, and especially in this heavy control metagame, which we were talking about, right? It's very good against a lot of that. It's had multiple top 4 finishes.
It is not something that you can't tech it for aggro as well, aggro heavy metagames either, right? You could start your Omega Supreme deck list with 3 Dad, 3 Unhostilities, 3 Sabs.
Yeah.
and heroic resolves from my spotlight. Like, you could start your deck list like that. You absolutely, like, very well could. Is that enough to make your matchup good if you are every turn playing an impactful secret action into your aggro opponent? Probably, maybe. Like,
it's a time thing, right? Like, you're hoping they run out of gas by you doing that strategy more than anything, right?
You better call correctly every time, right?
Yeah. The one time you lay stab arms and they belligerence you, you're gonna feel bad.
Or the one time you lay dad and they call it on their counter espionage, you're dead, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Or you lay heroic resolve and it actually didn't matter because they didn't try to kill you, but they did a lot more damage to you by playing and not playing another secret. You know, there's so much variability.
Right, you play you play heroic resolve, they're afraid of sab, they play a reckless charge and a pocket processor, and you're like, well, now I'm dumpstered, like, oh bad, like, right?
It's the worst feeling. It is just the worst feeling.
That kind of thing happens too. Wasting heroic resolve hurts, like, deep in my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is brutal.
You just hear a little glass break, and it's just your heart. It's your heart when that happens.
Yeah. 1.5 and maybe on the way down because aggro's coming up with ATP-4, I think. So.
Yep. 100%.
That's where I put it. All right. You want to do the next one? Next intro one?
I'll do the next one. Yeah. So we got ASP. Yeah. ASP. You know, classic Wave 4 ASP. It's got like little boosts here or there, especially from Wave 5 with the addition of Fangry being able to like make the 5-wide generic ASP like that much better. Of having just this unbelievably great 7-star aggro option. You don't see a lot of the 3 ASP and like 11 or 12 guy too much anymore, because I think the value is just like the 5-wide at this point.
There's one instance of that, and
really?
It is actually with Seeker Starscream.
This is true.
So Seeker Starscream, because he gives bold to Seekers or Planes, is like, if you let's say that like you're playing a blankless deck with Starscream, right? So you can kind of like, you can fiddle with the mechanics of his flip to alt ability. And his just like, he's just flip, draw a card, right? Like, you can plan the improvised shield that you definitely drew off of that trigger.
Absolutely.
And then attack with your guy and hit the trigger, etc., right? And then flip back to the other mode, mill 3 cards, basically because, oh, look, none of these are blanks. What a huge shame. I guess my Night Flight has bold 3 now.
Night Flight Bolt 3 ASP is big. It's a lot of damage.
I've watched. It's not a deck I've played personally, but it is a deck I have watched a decent amount of, and the numbers you get to swing it on are quite impressive. Mm-hmm. The biggest issue is that some of the HP curving in the game, you know, starting with Wave 5, right? Like, looking at Night Racer, looking at Fangry, just kind of passed a lot of the ASP by, is the truth of the matter.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's like... And there's just like these more. There's so many more strategies. Like it has regressively more and more every set. It's harder to keep Tailwind from living, like just not getting like hit out of nowhere. You know, more people are playing Spy Satellite Uplink. More like Spotlights exist. Like I've seen someone play Galaxy Prime Thrust into 5-wide ASP, turn 1 Spotlights, and crash and kill Tailwind. I mean, like, what do you do? What do you do against that, right? Like, there's just so much, like I think the deck sees a lot of play. I think like people love ASP. People love the little purple planes, and for good reason, right? Like,
also, Little Purple Planes is a great band name, in case you're wondering.
It is a fantastic band name. Coming to a Discord near you. It is like.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I distracted you.
No, I pictured like a bunch of instruments with like green pips going all the way up like the neck of the guitar and everything like that for like tailwind and everything. Fantastic. But
that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
We'll make a shirt. I'll make you. It'll go on the list of art to make for mugs that you desire.
Absolutely.
Databank Bros. Just Jempty. Basher Bash.
Basher Bash.
Oh man. Basher Bash still has to happen. It swear to God, it does have to happen.
It has to happen. We'll figure this out eventually.
Okay, we will.
But till then, I'm putting ASP at tier 2. People love to play it, and I think it does have like it because of like it has so many like variable like aggro team options it has. Like you mentioned the Starscream, which I totally forgot about. It's got Fangry. It also has Slipstream as another like fifth character option, which is actually like really good. I think it's better against aggro teams, like aggro matchups, than the control is for Fangry. But it's just like it still has options. Like
I was thinking about this the other day. Like I think that like a new orders like Slipstream ASP deck might be like legitimate. Just being able to play like this like weird bad cars deck that just has 5 characters, right? Like even if you're just playing like Nitro boosters and new orders, like and then just the rest of your deck was orange and orange green, right? Like I think that in and of itself, you could even like lean into the Pierce a little bit if you really wanted to, right? You could play lose the initiatives and wedge formations and that kind of thing, right?
You could. Yeah.
But I think that might be legitimately like a real strategy that like people have not been considering to the adequate amount. Like I was playing around with like building this deck, and because I know. Look, I shout out to Teletran, incredible software. I just prefer to build my decks in these ugly spreadsheets that are color coded.
They're ugly, my dude. I know he's
they're effective.
I just want to preface. Richard's so sweet. He's always sharing his Google Docs like format for deck building. And like every time I'm gonna use this, I go to use it, I'm like, God, I hate doing this. I feel like I'm at work, like in an Excel spreadsheet, more than I'm actually like deck building. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah,
spreadsheets are useful.
I know they're useful.
I'm not gonna win this argument. Go ahead.
You're not gonna win. You're not gonna win. But no, I think that's an option, right? Like untap ASP is kind of a scary thought. Like it's a very scary thought. And
it's just something I've been playing around with. I'm not sure what kind of legs it has, but I think that there's something there, and I think it's probably. I mean, because being able to have a turn where you attack with 3 of your ASPs, like that's the idea, right? Like would be like flip, slipstream, swing, slipstream lives.
Yeah.
Untap slipstream, flip him back. Hit a card or don't. Doesn't really matter on the first one.
Yep.
Right? Like, and then swing with, like, the rinky-dinkiest Visper is the bad one, I think.
Yeah, Visper.
Visper or Stormcloud, whichever one's the worst one. Just, like get in there, hopefully hit a green, etc., whatever, right? Like, especially if you can get an untap there, that'd be fantastic. But, like, the idea, like, just being, like, something along those lines, and then being able to anthem your team with Slipstream and swing with 3 of them on top of the anthem you get from hitting green pips, just being like +3 above where these 5 and 4 stars would normally exist, like seems really solid. Now, if you're missing on the anthem, because the reveal from Slipstream is random,
it is super random. Yeah.
If you're missing on that and you're hitting, if you're hitting on that, you are getting to discard the card. I was thinking about like the operation be like the anthem being the primary thing you want. The anthem is the primary thing you want, but if you're not, you are getting cards of your opponent's hand and making Slipstream a more relevant attacker. So it's not as if you were losing everything when you're doing this kind.
Yeah.
Bit, right?
Yeah, that's an option. Know. That honestly like. One more partner for 5-white ASP is actually Horrible. Like we've seen like horrible 5-white ASP that plays a lot more orange blacks like do really well because Horrible's kind of ridiculous. That idea of being able to play a Nitro boosters ping with Horrible, swing, untap, and then go again is actually like a really scary idea. Or just new
erratic energy grenade too, because those guys are just so little. They're dinky, like heads almost.
Yeah.
Well, you and I might need to brew this off recording.
I think we might have to. I know what we're playing for June. We're both playing the same deck for June, I see. Alright. Yep, ASP and Tier 2. ASP and Tier 2 for sure.
Yeah, ASP and Tier 2, and like maybe it's gonna move up. Who knows? It's a wider aggro deck. If aggro comes back into the fold, which we think it really might, then like maybe it goes up. Who knows?
Yeah, it's not a bad wide option.
Speaking of aggro decks, take it away.
Here we go. We got Driftworks. Driftworks is a really weird deck to kind of talk about because it has so much going on.
Okay, I have a problem with the word weird as your choice.
Do tell.
I think Driftworks is a quirky deck.
Yeah, it's super quirky. Yeah,
it has lots of nuances, but they're all so cool.
It's so cool. If you ever wanted to play a deck that like doesn't necessarily draw a bunch of cards for hand advantage, but cycles cards to be like, yeah, this sucks, I'm gonna get rid of it and hopefully get something else. This is that deck. Like, the amount of card cycling this deck can do, the amount of the amount of weird, quirky cards that this deck can mainboard because of It Works, because of Drift, because of just being able to draw so many cards with Clip Jumper is so fascinating. Like every deck list I've seen of Driftworks,
8 cards different.
Yeah,
10 cards different from each other.
Huge.
Like a huge chunk of the deck is different.
Yeah, it's always super ugly. Like, in terms of deck lists, Driftworks is one of the ugliest looking decks ever printed.
It's so true. You're like, I have 1 2 2 1 1 1 3 2 1 3, and you're like, oh my god. Like, yes, you're playing 3 turbo boosters and 3 grenade launchers and maybe 3 enterprise shields, but are you playing more than 2 of anything else in your entire deck?
It doesn't need to.
Like, yeah, I know it doesn't need to, because you see so much of your deck. Like, you just have so much selection.
Yeah. And because of that, like, it's another one of these decks where, like Soundwave, it's very combo oriented. Is again a deck that's closest to combo archetype in the game that doesn't have a lot of combo archetypes outside of Daring Escape and Overwhelming Advantage, right? And Daring Escape's out for ATP, so like having more. Yeah,
Daring Escape's out, and OA is
always here.
Even though I love it, it's always around in the 2-3 bracket.
Yeah, pretty much. pretty much. This deck has so much nuance. Like this is a tough deck to pilot, pick up and pilot and do well. Like, you actually need to put reps in it to understand how the cycling impacts your actual turns. Sometimes you don't sometimes you will It Works turn 1. Sometimes you won't It Works till turn 3, 4, 5 because it's just not the right time. And it, as an aggro deck, untaps are obviously incredibly strong. That's what cards do. It's always no deck has a good matchup against cards when cards hit all their untaps. That's just kind of the nature of it.
No. Unless they have multiple lose the initiatives, because the first time that you untap into an enemy lose the initiative, I can tell you this, even if you're not that far behind, you do want to concede that game.
You kind of do. It's the worst feeling. It is gosh, it's literally the equivalent of getting married, and when someone says, do you have any objections, lose the initiatives there, I do. Stopping the whole thing. You're like,
bro, I paid so much for this.
I did. The bucks I had here.
Oh my gosh. Driftworks is okay. We talked about the core. So Driftworks is interesting, cool. It is odd.
It's strong.
It's strong. It is. I think you have to put it in tier 2, and a big piece of this is it's an asterisk. I think if it is going in tier 2, it's the best tier 2 deck of the bunch.
Yeah.
I think the king of tier 2, right? And a lot of that is because, and you and I have talked about this before we were recording here today, right? That Driftworks is a huge skill expression deck.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in general, if you're looking at, we'll call it Menasor, right? Almost any pilot can win about 80% of the games that Menasor has access to winning, and pilot skill will win that last 20% or so.
Yeah.
And that might not be the actual distribution. I'm kind of creating estimates here, right?
Yeah, this is player estimate, right? Player estimate.
Yeah, it's a player estimate, right? It's player skill expression, right? It's not that Menasor will win 100% of its games, but of its games played, the 100% that Menasor has access to, I think the majority of players can win the majority of games for that deck. Whereas I think when you look at a deck like Driftworks, I think the number's much smaller. I think about 30% or so of the players who pick up Driftworks without really practicing much can win. Sorry. I said any player who picks up the draft can win about 30% of the wins that Driftworks has access to, and skill expression earns you up to 70% additional of just the wins that the deck has access to actually putting on its record in a tournament.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're gonna play Driftworks, do not just pick it up 2 days before the tournament, because this deck looks cool, because it's gonna punish you. It's punished me. I've watched it. Even some of the more experienced people with it still make mistakes because the deck's just so hard to play.
I have never personally played Driftworks, and I would never pick it up and play it in a tournament because I know I would suck horrendously.
You should play it in a one day.
I would try playing it one day. I would try that. Just that's part of practicing, right? Like it would make it look like I'm not a student driver trying to play Driftworks, right? like that, like and like just.
I love that phrasing. Oh my god, that's great.
It's
okay,
so
keep
true,
going.
though.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Like I want, like, I'm trying to think of like a person in the Discord currently that has put some of the most reps in with Driftworks. I'd say probably Jumpty. Like playing against Jumpty with Driftworks honestly can sometimes make it feel like Driftworks is like a top tier 1 deck. Because of like someone who's
Scott
played...
too.
Oh, Scott, yeah,
like,
Scott's a great example.
Even okay, here's another thing though too. Like between those two lists, right? Like I think there was a tournament where Dan, Scott, and Jeffy all registered Driftworks, and each of their lists was like 11 cards different. It was like something ridiculous like that, and they were all convinced that the other two person's lists were bad.
Yeah.
I know, because I talked to them. I was like, Scott was like, yeah, Dan and Jeffy's lists are awful, and Jeffy was like, yeah, like Dan and Scott's lists are awful, and Dan was like, yeah, Jeffy and Scott's lists are awful.
Yeah.
It was so funny because
so funny.
I think like all of them did okay, but like I think
Jumpty did the best. I think
they
he
were
top
just
4'd, I
did.
think. Yeah.
You did. Hey, which would you like to ask which of those players' deck lists that I consulted on?
Gosh, it must have been Jumpty's.
Oh, you know what? It was Jumpty's. Now that you mention it.
Do we need to add Dan and Scott to the specific time?
No. This is not a call out. This is not a call out. I'm just stating the facts as they are presented. That's just it.
It's true.
Anyway. So yeah, Driftworks, king of tier 2. I think that's where we have to put it.
Absolutely. Going on to what I think is another king of the tier, we got Living Weapon Megatron, and right away. I'm just gonna put this guy right at the top of Rogue. I think we talked about this off the call. He definitely is, I think, the king of Rogue decks and what Rogue decks are kind of designed to do and take advantage of. So, talking a little bit more about like Living Weapon Megatron is a great example of like what the Rogue tier can do. Like, I have piloted Living Weapon Megatron OA because most of the Living Weapon Megatron decks that ever see play are OA variants because they really fit the OA shell very well, and they have a great backup plan.
OA being any OA strategy that is good into sab arms, really solid.
Really good. You take out like a third of your biggest like issue right there, right?
Mm-hmm. And this is with the stratagem, by the way. Such heroic nonsense from ATP1.
Correct. The one, it gives +3 health, and opponents can't keyword scrap, Megatron's weapons. So Megatron, I was able to win a whole Titan 1 event playing OA Living Weapon Megatron.
I know.
Because of multiple factors that relate to why Rogue decks can do well and can win events, right? It was completely unexpected. This is a deck no one talked about, no one was really playtesting, and no one like once ATP1 kind of came out and once like Jazz hit the circuit, because Jazz already like makes OA like Jazz hurts OA strategies really badly. So people just completely, they just took Living Weapon Megatron, such heroic nonsense, just kind of put it in the box as just like, this is cool as a casual, but I'm not going to play with it, right? And it just abused the fact that Jetfire had just came onto the Titan 1 ban list. It now, the main reason why people were playing Catch Off Guard, Take by Surprise, Disarm, pretty much got taken out of people's deck list and put into Sab Arms. People were playing so many Sab Arms, like I'm pretty sure, like if you go to the tournament like results, it was like the 6th most played card in top 8.
And on top of that, like I remember as someone who was playing Sab Arms during that tournament, like Sab Arms was a card where I went, I wish I had another one, because Sab Arms was great for me all tournament long.
It's an amazing card.
Except against you.
Yeah, against Living Weapon Megatron, Sab Arms is the worst possible card in existence. Just about.
I'll take Doodoo Butter for 600.
Doodoo Butters, absolute Doodoo Butters.
It was. Yeah. Actually, this is a fun anecdote. So, I'll get through this as fast as I can. I'm not really that fast of a talker. Anyway, so you and I played twice in that event. I was on Soundwave Jazz with Overkill as my third mainboard bot, and I sided into Fire Drive. And that was kind of the event that was like the advent of the Soundwave Fire Drive deck list as well.
Yep.
That was the thing that inspired it going forward. Partially because my match into Stefan, where we had like one of the that top 8 too. So the quarterfinals I played against Stefan, who was one of my losses in Swiss, and I beat him in the quarterfinals, and it was like some of the closest game 3 thing ever.
Ridiculous.
And then the other person who beat me on Swiss was you. So 6-round tournament went 4-2 in a top 8. And I played against you the next round, and I had maybe one of the greatest matches I've ever gotten to play this game when you're on Living Weapon Megatron.
Same.
And like, I just got stonewalled. But the funniest thing about it was, like, when we played in Swiss, I didn't board out my sab arms because, like, when have you ever boarded out sabotage armaments?
When? Like, when has that card ever been that bad that you sided out of a matchup? Right.
And I ended up boarding it out in the top 4 match, and it was like I was much happier with it gone. Like, I was much happier not having it in my deck. And then what's funny is this tournament was also a tournament where I was sideboarding out another card I would never think to be sideboarding out. But against Menasor, who was like everywhere in this event, there was like 6 or 7 of them. I learned that I was supposed to board out Camion Crash.
Yeah, against Menasor,
I was like,
right?
Against Menasor, because my health total is just so low. Like, the Soundwave Jazz, so Soundwave is 16, Jazz is 10, and then Overkill is 11, right? That 37. Is only a health total of 37. That's really low. And when you have Camion Crash, the 1-2 often wasn't enough to equalize. Like, you were still trading down on relative damage total, which is wild to think about, but it's true. And but that event was like Camion Crash getting boarded out in certain matchups and Sab Arms getting boarded out in certain matchups. I never in a million years thought that, like, metagames would exist where there was a card that was right for me to main board and right for me to take out as well. Oops, I just knocked over something near me. Don't worry about that. I'm fine.
I'm panicked.
But yeah, go ahead. Back to your stories about that.
Yeah, well, that story was really. I think that story really exemplifies, like, again, the access that, like, this rogue deck really took is it's like it was the surprise factor. No one saw it coming. No one knew how to play against it. Like, no one knew how to play against it, and it had such a great, like, it has, like, and this is also part of, like, you could do this outside of ATP metagames. You can totally do this, but it sees a lot more play in what when Yu-Gi-Oh we would call smoke screening. Where you would smoke screen your main deck, and you take in post board your sideboard, pretty much turn it into a different deck. Like, I main boarded OA, and I would make it a point every game as a more of a power play and a mental check on my opponent. Like, I'm gonna OA you. I'm gonna do it with Megatron. I'm gonna do it with 3 weapons. I'm gonna do it with P-Box, and I want you to respect that, because it happens easily. And so what happens is
you had to play Combat Dagger for this.
I did have to play Combat Dagger, but I only had to play 2 because Living Weapon just gets it. Now I can play Howitzer. Now you can play Howitzer, and it's significantly better as a card than Combat Dagger. It's such a better card.
It's a better card, but, like, is it better when you're trying to OA or bluff OA? I'm not sure.
It's better because you can play Backup Beam, and you can plan because you play all Decepticons.
I guess you're playing Decepticons. I guess you're playing Huffer in your list.
I was playing Brawn.
That doesn't mean
I was playing Brawn.
Was it Brawn? It was Brawn.
Yeah.
It was Brawn.
It was Brawn. Now you can take out Brawn and the Star card, because I was originally playing like Galaxy. I was a 5-14-5 playing Fuel Cache. Fuel Cache. Now you can play Slipstream, and I think Slipstream is just such a better
card. Or you could play Scourge.
You can play Scourge. Scourge is significantly better of a partner.
And you can still play a Star card, but you can play Aura of Dominance now if you wanted to.
You can play Aura. That was, see, I was actually testing. Okay, coming back to Living Weapon Megatron, and bringing up all that. Like, Living Weapon Megatron got a lot of support in ATP-3. He got Aura. He got Dad. He got Howitzer for the freaking Combat Daggers. He got Slipstream as a partner. But the problem is, in this control metagame, Disarm exists. People are playing Disarm. People are playing catch-off cards, and it hurts. I have never, the equivalent of getting lose the initiative with cars is getting disarmed with a fully loaded Megatron. Like, it is I've done it too.
I've done it.
Horrible.
It's really gross.
Yeah. Like, Living Weapon Megatron has a great matchup against Menasor. It has a great matchup against Overlord. A great matchup against Galaxy. Actually, the worst matchup against Galaxy, because it can't handle Galaxy throws very well. But
especially on the draw, you're just like toast.
You're toast. You can't win. You immediately draw and you scoop to game 3 if you can. That's all you could do.
You slow roll game 1. You slow roll game 1. Make it take as long as possible, and then you just win with an OA right before time.
Yep. Exactly. 100% how it is. And that's part of the OA power play, right? And I totally got sidetracked off this again. The smoke screening play. So I would always make a point during the tournament to OA like game 1 with Megatron, and then completely sideboard all my OAs for belligerences, and become this incredibly huge value attacker deck. Because people would side in a ton of stuff to beat OA, and now it doesn't exist anymore. Like
what other card would you cut in the sideboarding?
Other than Combat Dagger?
I was gonna say you said I'm gonna sideboard my OAs for belligerences. You didn't say you would cut Combat Dagger.
Oh, you absolutely
definitely cut Combat Dagger.
Yeah, you take out Combat Dagger. You take out Combat Dagger.
So
You can take out Backup Beam if you wanted to. You can take out a bunch of stuff. Like you can take out like 8 cards, and now become this huge value attacker deck. With triple P box, because the trigger on P box happens all at the same time, or it happens consecutively, and it doesn't change. The top card does not change. So if you have 2 P boxes on. You missed the first one, you can call the right one for the second one. I have been able to swing. I think my highest swing in the tournament with Living Weapon Megatron was 26, with 2 B boxes, a Backup Beam, and a Master Metallicado. Just to preface how hard Living Megatron can just beat face.
I think you would have beaten that in your one attack on me if you hadn't whiffed on the first guess.
I would have. I'm pretty sure I would have.
If memory serves, you were gonna hit 27 if you didn't whiff on the first P box guess.
Yeah.
I think I defended for like 8 and got 1 shot. It was like something ridiculous like that.
It was wild, and that wasn't the only time I did that too. Just to show like the consistency of it. People feared the box, but we spent enough time on Living Weapon Megatron.
Oh my god! Fear the box.
Fear the box, and it's just Whirl in the background, ready to shoot with his little camera blaster.
Oh my god!
Whatever the frick that thing is.
Okay, we gotta move on. Living Weapon, Rogue, but like the King of the Rogues.
King of the Rogues.
And now. Now, in the completely opposite of that is my friend and yours, or really not anyone's friend at all, Overlord.
Yeah.
Overlord is, at this point, almost synonymous with Stefan, right? Like, Stefan played, I think, at least 3 tournaments, and I would be absolutely shocked if he wasn't playing in June.
If he's playing in June, I don't. If he's not, I don't think it's Stefan. Like legit, like we should like have an intervention if he's not playing Overlord. Like I should flash the meme up here of the Stefan looking back at Overlord while she's walking with Shockwave.
Oh my gosh, please do. If you can in editing in the post, you can just like flash that thing up. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely, of course I can.
Overlord is of the Big Boy Blues probably the single coolest one. Just being able to like uniquely exploit star cards in the way that he does, feeling like we talked about this offline multiple times. I think you maybe mentioned it like publicly some places, but Overlord is unique in the TFTCG in that he's the first deck that I've ever seen or played with that feels like a ramp strategy, where like you are accelerating along the resource axis to hopefully hit payoffs, and the payoffs are star cards here, right? So it's really just like card quality and character quality. You're ramping along both of those axes as you go. Star card quality, because playing star cards is generally just like they're just more powerful than regular cards, right? It's just true. And so like him giving you extra plays, those extra plays being star cards or putting star cards in your hand so you can play them more often, or getting 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s, etc. like that. Like Overlord tries to accrue these things and isn't like super consistent at hitting them, but he does give you a lot of access. So you can potentially hit them, right? Overlord is very rarely out of games because he's a couple like really high ceiling plays that he's always got access to. And the fact that you're scaling your attack over the course of the game, he's almost always going to be the last one standing on your side, is, I think, really important, really cool. And the technology that has evolved the last, like, 2 events, sideboarding into Too-Tall. You know? He's bringing in ATP-3 Soundwave, because even against the decks that, like, don't put a lot of characters in the KO, since there's no characters in the KO, Soundwave fills your KO. So he kind of cheats along the ramp axis, as long as you don't need... like to have more characters. If you just need like a more relevant, you need to make sure your attackers are relevant with Overlord as part of your big strategy. Going Too-Tall is just what's in vogue.
Yeah, how many times have you seen games where Overlord has won really hard matchups because they go into the Too-Tall? And it's just like it's so traditional of a Too-Tall too, which makes it so cool. Like it is like the equivalent of like OPBL and Nemesis Prime, Double Prime Too-Tall. Like that's like It's a tough like thing to play against, because oh gosh, who do I kill first? Do I kill Soundwave first to try to avoid getting all these Soundwave triggers and getting more cassettes for Overlord to get? Or do I kill Overlord first because he's going to be the biggest body at the end? But I mean, either way, you're gonna have a big boy to deal with whoever you kill first. Like that's like the scary part, right? It's gonna be either Soundwave with 8, who's gonna be 8, 16, 4, or Overlord, who's gonna be a 1 million 18, 2. and that's like not even a joke.
Hold on. He's going to be a 1 million 22 bold one, tough one, because there will be an aura of dominance on him.
Oh yeah, that's right. Forgive me. You're 100% correct. And then he'll 2-pronged attack you on the following turn.
Yeah. Although, okay, I don't think we talked about this before. I think 2-pronged attack is really high, but it's really high. But I think the orange pip is actually quite punishing in Overlord. And I actually think that it's probably not supposed to be a 3 of in your main deck. I think it maybe even supposed to be a 1 of in your main deck, or maybe it's just supposed to be relegated to the sideboard for when you're playing I think it's better against aggro, as hilarious as that sounds.
Oh, it's 100% better against aggro, because, the aggro needs the cards in hand.
Eating their cards in hand is so good. And, the 2 damage is whatever.
Yeah, they have to pick it. That's honestly, a reason why 2-pronged is also, has, people play 3 of them and still have seen success with it, is because how many Hollow Matters have you not seen mainboarded anymore?
A lot.
Yeah.
Hollow Matters they're relegated down to 1. Let's flash back to the primary Holy Quake is Quake days, right? I had 2 main board Hollow Matter projectors in my Sky Shadow Horrible deck back in the day.
Yeah.
2. And I didn't feel like my matchup was good. I thought it was okay. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the world we came from, where you needed at least 2 Hollow Matter. People were playing 3 sometimes, 3 main board.
They were, and you were looking at it, you're man, those ugly, just singular green pips. But
what are you gonna do?
It was necessary.
It was so
I don't know.
necessary.
I don't know what you're gonna do. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's sideboard, if even. And I think I don't know if that's correct per se. There's not a lot of direct damage going on in Titan 1. If you're looking at the list, there's just not a lot. Honestly, the biggest direct damage deck is the 4-white Pierce decks, the 4-white Pierce list, and Overlord. Because he not only does he get 2-pronged, he gets Bolt of Lightning, which is also another reason to where if you actually I think if you want to prepare for Overlord matchup, I think you actually need to mainboard a Hollow Matter if you're really expecting and preparing for Overlord, because it automatically makes 2-pronged only half as good anymore. It makes Bolt of Lightning significantly weirder to play around if you see it. They can play marksmanships, they play Cameo Crash, they play scouting mission to ping themselves to draw 2, or they can ping you if they want to. They have a lot of flexible direct damage options.
I've had a lot of characters die and also draw me 2 cards. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's happened a lot of times.
They died with insurance money. Is how they died. That's how it feels dying from scouting mission. But
I'm giving you 2 cards. But he's also dying.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Overlord is squarely in tier 1.
Most played
I think
deck,
Overlord,
I'd say, too, in Titan 1.
Overlord's most played deck. Well, he's just unique. On top of the fact that some of the best art, the bot mode art for Overlord is incredible. I don't know if people have seen these yet. I'm not sure I should be talking about them.
Oh, I don't know.
But so there are spot glosses for Overlord. There are these promos. Let me see if I can pull one out real quick. I don't think I have one for Overlord or anything like that, but there are these really awesome promos that ATP has going on that are these clear, blanked out outside of the character art promos that we give out as rewards for doing well and things of those things and
they're so cool.
Overlord is
so cool.
Overlord is getting one, and it looks even better because in the art he's holding the top part of a carcass of this guy he just killed, and that is still in the cut out art, and it looks
awesome.
It's amazing. The conscious of Stark. It's anyway. I'm gonna stop geeking out now, but Overlord is great. If you want to do well, Overlord's a great way to play, and he feels fun and he feels unique, and he has a lot of decisions in game.
A lot of decisions.
It's still very hard.
Character lineups. How many different lineups have you seen with Overlord? Where it's not just
a ton.
It's so many. So many.
And you know, Sea Spray is the talk of the town, but I would argue that Highbrow is just better in Overlord.
I was talking with Stefan about this on a side little tangent again with Overlord. We think Sea Spray is actually, out of the 3 ATP-3 6 drops, Sea Spray is actually the worst for Overlord.
Yeah.
In my opinion, in our opinion, because like the flip density is so awkward. Like you really need to flip like Sea Spray, and oftentimes you don't need the +1 attack. You're getting that just from your people dying anyway.
Yep.
So you know, +1 defense and being able to bounce aura from Highbrow seems good to me.
Or being able to hit your opponent's energy pack in a pinch, like those are all super relevant things.
Yeah. Or just
also
just going on the discard side more of a Slipstream. That's an option.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can.
Non-flip intensive Pierce 2 is really good. Being able to like exploit like the higher power, like so if you're playing Slipstream, I will say this: if you're playing Slipstream, 2-pawn attacks are 3 of mainboard.
Oh yeah.
Because
100%.
Because when you can turn Slipstream into a real attacker, she hits like a truck, not a plane, like a truck.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I think it's time for us to move on to another big boy, but
another big boy.
not quite the same. He is a beast, but not in the same sense.
Yeah, this is Snapdragon. So anyone who's been following my channel knows I have a nice little affection, a little heart going off to Snapdragon there because of the character series, character quests I did with him. So first off, the good points. So, and actually before the good points, this is a generalization of Snapdragon, like of all the Snapdragon decks that exist out there, which there's not many. To give a hint to where we think he's placed on the tier, not a lot of people have tried him out early on. Now that the metagame has settled, he's starting to see more play, especially in sideboards. Yes. He is such a unique character because there's no other character that really hoses like so many abilities, like straight hose, like Snapdragon is. Like Snapdragon has a ton of text on him. Not even like a ton of text per se. He has just a ton of abilities. Can't move in alt mode. Can't move damage in alt mode. Can't repair while he's in alt mode. Sturdy, tough one.
Sturdy.
So, yeah. He lives forever in alt mode. Like he is tough to kill in alt mode. And then
he's also sturdy in alt mode.
He's very sturdy in alt mode. Jeez, here we go again. In bot mode, he has the most universally like hose ability that is seen play. It, every time your opponent draws a second card for the turn, they have to now discard a card. So like every time anytime you flip Sea Spray down alt mode to draw 2, discard 1, now you're drawing 2, scrapping 2. Every time you play Pocket Processor, it's draw 2, scrap 1.
Okay. I've played multiple times lately against Snapdragon with OA and looked at the confidence in my hand and just like audibly sighed.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes draw 2, scrap 3 cards. That is stupid. It's then so dumb.
But you get to play another card in your hand if you have any left.
Oh yeah, so I'm down 2 cards for this. Or 3 cards for this guy. Played the confidence too. So to the point that Snapdragon was such a problem for the OA decks that like I started to mainboard treasure hunts for fear of playing Snapdragon because it is a card advantage card that recoups me and advances me toward my strategy that does not say draw cards on it.
Yeah. He also has what Overlord has, and he is a non-flip intensive centerpiece, which means you can play flip intensive side piece characters, which don't happen very often, but they're strong and they're there's a lot of really strong ones. There's Highbrow, there's Slipstream, we talked about these, or my personal favorite with Snapdragon that I played with, Bonsaitron, because
Bananatran
Bonsaitron, that guy's legit. Like the fact that the biggest issue with Snapdragon, there's a couple like standout things about Snapdragon that kind of make people like weird, like not want to play him. He really hard loses to belligerence in alt mode. He's got the superior problem of like he's all tough, but he's got the sturdy, but he's got 1 base defense, and so like belligerence in him was just like it's just like this hurts so badly. But Bonsaitron actually helps that because you can actively keep looking in your opponent's hand to find belligerence and actively try to hit it with like espionage, counter espionage. Your mainboard infiltrates. The deck is super cool. It's a really great anti-meta deck, which anti-meta character that makes anti-meta decks, which we don't have a lot in the game. You could argue the 4-white Pierce deck is an anti-meta deck because of like the format that we're in, and I think that's very true. But this is like hard truth anti-meta in its like purest form. And for that very reason, I think we just have to put it in Rogue. Like it's got really good gas against Dinobots, against Menasor, in both modes against Menasor.
There's an asterisk here.
Yeah, there's an asterisk. There's a huge asterisk.
And that huge asterisk has a white and a black pip and is a utility from ATP-4.
And it's opportunism. Opportunism immediately makes Snapdragon a lot more playable.
First off, spoiled on this channel here on Blue vs. Orange.
Yep, this is true. This is true. I did, didn't I? Me and Matt.
You did.
Me and Matt.
It's true, you and Matt, yeah. But Snappy D, or as he's affectionately called in the server, Nope Dragon or Nope Daddy.
Yep, Nope Dragon.
Opportunism is no joke. He is a deck that typically is a little heavy on utilities, just from the fact like you really want pocket processor, but
he's a double pocket processor deck like Dark Mount.
100%. I totally agree there. But having opportunism and getting to put that on either your little guys to make them more relevant or more survivable is really big. Putting it on Snapdragon himself, just any utility that gives attack, right, is huge.
Yeah. It's
right,
so good.
And the additional 2 health and the focus are all really relevant, especially because Snapdragon kind of ends up playing a lot of black pips.
He does,
right? Just by nature. So being able to get rid of those when you don't need them and like dig for your oranges or dig for your blues is a relevant thing. Focus really does come up.
Yeah. Having a 12 drop that becomes an 18-1 sturdy tough 1 in alt mode. That Focus 1. That also tells you can't repair or move damage from anyone is like wild. Or an 18-2 in bot mode that tells you can't generate card advantage. Focus 1.
Yep.
Yes. Oh, and bounty.
I mean,
he has a bounty ability too.
The bounty's like been really relevant lately. Like Smurf played a version of this. Shout out to Smurf again. This is the Smurf tier, so it makes sense, right? So, like Smurf was using the bounty ability on Snapdragon super effectively during the tournament. To the point where like I was like actually finding myself like just picking up my thing, and I just was like, this is just absurd. Like I'm getting got so bad by this.
It's just a thing for the channel. Anyone who followed, everyone should notice in the videos that I upload matches with me playing Star Trek, I always forget the bounty. I never think about it. I have literally, there's been so many times I've like just killed something with Snapdragon bound and just never bountied because like I did think of it. There goes that. And like the bounty's great. Having a vandalize that returns whatever upgrade you want.
Like a vandalize, disarm, hybrid type thing.
Galaxy Prime don't like that. Like a strategy against Galaxy Prime is just to keep one of the little guys alive for a little bit, and then force like
let him get suited up. And then go. I'm gonna like basically disarm you.
Yeah, Snapdragon will just go. Nope. straight to those utilities. Yeah.
Nope Dragon.
Anyway, Rogue tier for this format, but definitely going up in ATP-4. I think hands down.
I think solidly tier 2 in ATP-4. I think.
Yeah, solidly. Yeah, and depending on the meta, probably more, in my opinion.
Maybe.
Maybe
depending
on the metas, right? Because that's the type of character.
Yes. Absolutely. Fun fact: Snapdragon, not a leader. So we have seen Starscream so far. Starscream. So the fact that he's 12 stars and Starscream is 8 stars means that you could play a 12-8-5 3-wide lineup, hate on enemy sturdy with Ghost Starscream's ability. You get to play Opportunism, you get to play Opportune Offensive, you get to have Nope Dragon, who's not that offensive, and you can play a 5-drop who is solid. Like you could play a Scourge there, or if you're the white pips, you could play a Night Racer. Like you could play, you could play any number of people in that slot. You could play Huffer if you wanted to. I know that sounds like kind of a joke, but just like the filtering through Huffer is really important and quite good. And having multiple sturdy characters, trust me, is not bad.
It's
it is
not
very
bad at all. Yeah, that's literally just hate speech to deck, and I can't wait to play it.
All right, I think we have to move on. We've been on Snapdragon for like 10 minutes.
Snapdragon is just so fun to talk about. It's so fun to talk about.
I know.
All right.
This one will not be one we talk about though.
No,
I think this next one is like a light one.
Super light one.
Talk about our boy Percy. Shout out Dan Arnold. Shout out to Christian for trying to play Perceptor in a world where he's not very good.
He's not very good.
Percy is kind of like in this present metagame, he's even worse against like the narrow tall decks because he's just he lacks survivability so much.
Yeah.
So
he's got probably the best game one against any control deck in the format. Then he just has the worst game 2 and 3 in existence. Because he has no sideboard character that like can emulate the tall strategies, right? Nope. He has no 2 tall. He's so flip intensive. He is literally the most flip intensive character probably in existence. Like if you spend a turn flipping anybody other than Perceptor, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like frankly.
Like you built your deck wrong. Probably.
Yeah.
Like in all honesty.
You thought you were playing like Pokemon and not Transformers probably. But yeah, like Perceptor is such a cool deck. And this is the character we talk about when we talk about Soundwave, like that plays very similar to the Soundwave, where you're generating like advantage throughout the game, and you're this cool control combo strategy. But this is not the meta for him. Yeah, he is. Nope. Yeah, I mean, like, do you even put him at tier 2, Richard? Like, do we even put him at tier 2? Or do you think he's a straight rogue? He does have a top 8 finish. Here's
why. I think he goes to tier 2. I think his status as a wrecker with the wrecker trait means that he will start to hybridize with wreckers, and so like if you see like some blue leaning wreckers decks, they'll be Perceptor decks, right?
Yeah.
And I think like in the case that you don't want Wheeljack, you will want Percy. And I think that like that will push him up to like being like a tier 2 strategy.
I like that.
I think he's pretty close to tier 2 right now. I think he's partially because like Perceptor is kind of a hangover from being good in previous formats. So he's a little more representation than some of the rogue decks that we've classified so far. But I think he's probably tier 2. I think that you'll see a homogenization a little bit.
Yeah, and we've seen that now. Like McCoy got top 8 with Perceptor, Impactor, Huffer, I believe, or Brawn.
Shout out to the doc.
Shout out to the doc, absolutely. The Impactor's good. The Impactor just like makes teams. It's incredible.
And he's not flip intensive.
He's not. Yeah. That is huge.
But on those big swings where you swing Percy and you don't wipe out a guy, you know who does?
Probably Impactor.
Impactor at the start of your next turn.
Absolutely. Oh
my gosh.
All
right, so let's next we got
here we go.
Actually, so the next 3 we can kind of talk about the next 3 all at once if you really want to, because I have them all listed at like tier 1.5 decks.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think we could talk a little bit about each of them. I think the longest one that's going to be talked about is actually Lord Megatron. How about we save him for last?
Let's save him for last. I agree.
Yeah.
So Lord Megatron, Dinobots, and Major Shockwave were the last three decks we wanted to talk about today of the super long 20 list tier list.
Yeah.
And we're putting them all to 1.5 for like a couple of reasons, right? Like they generally just kind of do things that the rest of the format is doing a little bit worse.
Yeah.
Even if what they're doing or the version they're doing of it is powerful or has some unique asset to it, right? And I think like a perfect example of this is Major Shockwave. Major Shockwave is a big boy blue deck. They got tons of beef with like the additional 6 drops, like Aura of Dominance coming onto the scene, Dad, like, and especially because Major Shockwave can play Dad off the top, right?
Yeah.
But like all the 6 are huge bonuses, but
huge.
Major Shockwave just does not have the same offensive output as Menasor, or as Galaxy Prime, or as Overlord.
Yeah.
So he's just kind of the 4th best big blue deck.
Yeah, even Overlord could rip cards out of opponent's hands almost just as well as Shockwave, you know?
Almost, and is less flip intensive to do it, too.
Yeah.
And Shockwave's really flip intensive.
Yeah.
He's awesome, and Valiant Effort is nuts in Shockwave.
Oh my gosh, Valiant Effort's insane with Shockwave. Like, huge, because you can play Night Racer and Slipstream, which are ranged, so you're going to get that ping oftentimes anyway.
You can play Huffer as well, like it's another one.
Yep.
Like you can play Huffer and Night Racer and Aura of Dominance as your singleton card. Like there's any number of things you'd be doing here.
It's a great deck building character, again, for similar to Overlord in that way. But yeah, just...
Yes.
Yeah, he does see a lot of play. People love Shockwave. He is a fan favorite deck.
Absolutely. Too. Also, Highbrow's also very good alongside him. I forgot to mention that. Not a ranged character, so Valiant Effort not quite as good there, but like the non-flip intensive Pierce 2 just really solid because Shockwave ends up playing a lot of random black pips as well. Like they just do.
And you can play Field Com a lot better in that deck too.
Yes.
With more specialists.
Field Com's great in that deck.
Yeah.
Yes.
More specialists means 3 Field Coms in my book. That's just me.
Yeah. So, cool deck, fun deck, great character, really interesting, much better. Just kind of like not doing something not as well as some other decks that already exist.
Yep.
Dinobots, I think, is in a similar space, but not because there's like a specific deck that does what they were doing better. So, Dinobots, okay, Christian, if you were to quantify in one word, what are Dinobots about? What would you say?
Stats. Hitting.
That's, yeah, they're about stats,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, if you just look at, they've never been the best attack stat characters or the best defense stat characters, but they have historically been the best, like middle ground characters. They defend and attack naturally for lots. Rampage just augmented that. WeFix just made their HP like hard to assail outside of combat, so that they're able to more reliably rely on those stats. And the truth of the matter is, the printing of Dad, alongside of the upping of just copies of end hostilities in people's decks, means that like they have just not been able to compete along the stat axis of efficiency as well as they have previously done since ATP 1.
They're basically
orange
high school
and blue.
They're basically high school jocks that once they got to college and they tried out for tryouts and they just didn't compete with the rest of the people practicing for the rest of the summer. That's kind of Dinobots in a analogram.
So not to say that they don't have any game, right? Like they could walk on. Like Dinobots has, I believe, made like multiple top 8s.
Multiple. Yeah. Not so much in ATP3, but in ATP2 definitely.
Not so much in ATP3. Yeah, and I think that like there's definitely a world to revisit them. I think people have not experimented much with blue Dinobots, which is a little bit better because it gets to utilize Dad a little bit better because that's a deck that doesn't mind playing secret actions so much.
Yep.
And I think that's something that maybe has some merit in exploring. But then like they just have fallen off somewhat, especially because Titan 1 in particular is a format where the direct damage just isn't as important. Yep. And so the WeFix resistance to direct damage is just not.
It's just not there. Yeah. All right. And so the last character that we're going to be talking about for this monumental, monstrous tier list that has taken us a long time to record, we got Lord Megatron. So, okay. Lord Megatron is again kind of a quirky deck, quirky character, and just overall like a really interesting like strategy. Because in ATP2 he got Bow Before Me, which as if you've heard it before, he gets +1/+1 for if he has a Decepticon upgrade on him, and every time a Decepticon flips from alt to bot mode specifically, each player mills the top 3 cards of their deck. This is such an interesting control strategy because he plays off of the 1375 like. Usually 1375. That's like the stars for a room that he has, like builds, and being able to mill the top cards off people's decks and not be able to get greens for your opponent is like huge. Like this guy is a game ender. Being able to trigger that ability, like having Scoundrel's Blaster be a 3 attack +1 defense upgrade for Lord Megatron is crazy.
With a green pip.
Hunkering down a Ghost Shield onto this guy. I have seen games where Lord Megatron is by himself against 3 targets, but he's got the Scoundrel's Blaster, he's got the Ghost Shield, and he's got base 7 defense, and no one can kill him.
Not to mention that like monumental natural 17 health.
Yeah, huge, and that's like not even including the fact that like you could potentially even have higher defenses if you even wanted to with like secret actions. It's just wild. But he doesn't have like the highest win percentage of a lot of decks. Nope. He doesn't. Nope. And honestly, if you were to ask me why that is, I couldn't give you a really clear answer. Like I don't know if it's because of like he needs better partners because like you can't like use horrible with him, right? Like he has to it has to flip from alt to bot, and you really want to leverage that because being able to get the shuffle trigger is like huge. Even like in this metagame where like Hollow Matter just doesn't see nearly as much play, which was just the bane of Lord Megatron's existence.
Yes.
He hasn't seen a lot of representation. He's a really strong sideboard character. He's seen a lot of sideboard play.
Yes, he has.
Yeah, but like,
and for good reason. Like, going too tall, if you can fit him, he's really solid.
Super great. Similar to Soundwave style, like too tall. It's just fantastic. But like, he just doesn't quite make that like cut. And he's like, we were talking about this off the cast too. Like, he's somewhere right between like he is not a tier 2 deck,
No.
But he's not a rogue deck. He kind of feels like he is, but he's also not quite a tier 1.5 deck at the same time.
He somehow is in between rogue and 1.5, but not tier 2. So he like sidesteps it. He's in a tier all his own.
He's just Lord Megatron tier. That's kind of where he sits. As weird as it is.
I mean, one of the biggest things. So like, I was playing with. I played a couple versions and seen a lot more versions of Lord Megs, right? And so like one of the things you would think naturally fits into what he's doing is like jazz with Here's the Thing, because being able to play Black Pips, like your opponent's Black Pips accelerate them through their deck faster, which means you'll trigger Lord Megatron's ability more quickly. But the problem is that Jazz is an Autobot.
Jazz is an Autobot. It's a big deal. It's
really frustrating. It's really frustrating. Like, and so like you can't realistically play him there, unless you have like some better Decepticon as your third character, and you really don't care about the Jazz thing in the entirety, right? Like, and so it just becomes like this weird balancing act. I think the really biggest gate for Megatron, Lord Megatron, is the Decepticon partners. Yeah. Like I think as the pool of Decepticon partners expands, he will get better. As the pool of Decepticon upgrades expands, he will get better, right? Like let's say there's ever like an Ion Blast or Optimus Prime that ATP decides to do like this for Megatron or Decepticons, something like that, like a +2/+1 or something like that, right? Like when you put it on Megatron because the battle before maybe a +3/+2. +3/+2 is absolutely completely ridiculous, even if it's not on a green pip. Like,
yeah. I mean, like, and something we haven't mentioned is like, you know, because he hasn't seen a whole lot of representation, there may not also be like enough like experimentation with him currently in this metagame, right? Like Decepticon Battle Masters, even though you don't flip them, they are Decepticon upgrades. We've seen Ansel, shout out to Kathoga, go and play Lord Megatron with Aimless, Raider Aimless, who becomes a 4+ attack, +1 defense weapon for Lord Megatron, which is absurd. Like that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, right? But you know, I think that lineup would be good if you didn't have to flip Night Racer to trigger Battle for me. Now, going back what you said with Decepticon partners, I'm excited to see Lord Megatron with Scourge. Like Scourge, I think has the potential to be a really interesting partner for Lord Megatron.
I also think that you have real potential with Slipstream Sights, which is not a lineup I've seen anyone try.
Yeah.
Besides being 6 stars and going in the utility slot, being a +2/+2 on him is bonkers, because you still get to have a weapon, you still get to have like a ghost shield if you want to hunker it down or can find a way to manipulate it onto your guy. Like that's nuts. And the focus is relevant. It's not the most important thing in the world, but it's relevant.
You're playing oranges, you're playing composites and ghost shields. Being able to focus those away on defense or onto attack is big, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, like once you're in the market for Slipstream, you are more than happy to be a rollout deck as well. And I think rollout is really solid in the deck, just because like because you're kind of like split along this like weird like two-pronged game plan. Being able to play cards with multiple combat pips is just really, really awesome.
And being able to play two-pronged attack is like a one-of with Slipstream. With like Rapid Descent to actually make it a little bit more of like a hand attack Lord Megatron deck is also like a really interesting like facet to that lineup.
Yeah, it is. Rapid Ascent maybe could be a really important thing. Or Electro-Optical Visor. Anybody? It's a Decepticon armor.
I mean, it is a Decepticon armor. You know, freaking, what is that called? Revenge Shield? I don't even remember what it's called. Do you remember what it's called?
Revenge Shield? What is that?
It's not called Revenge Shield. It's the Wave 4...
Okay. So think really hard. I'm gonna pull up the card list for Wave 4, and if you can guess what the name is, I will concede a game 1 to you next time we play.
I don't say that too often. Oh no. Oh my gosh, what is it called? It's not Compact Shield. I keep thinking of like Murderous Shield. I know it's not Murderous Shield. It is pretty wild looking. It's got Raider Chop Shop in the art. Gosh, I'm so pained I can't remember this awful card name.
All right, you've got 10 seconds to think of it.
I got nothing. I don't remember what it's called. What is it called?
All right. So it's called Hazardous Shield.
Hazardous Shield. God, I hate that card. Worthless. Yeah, you can play Hazardous Shield. It's revenge.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah. Anyway. gosh, horrible wait for cards aside, it's super. It's and just slightly better wave 5 cards for Decepticon armors aside too.
Hey! I'll have you know that Electro Optical Visor has 2 full con finals appearances.
It does.
In the same deck.
I cannot concede anymore to Electrical Optical Visor. I've had it played against me, and I was playing Quake, and it was pretty good against me. So I mean,
just looking at the hand is not that bad. Right? As someone who's like super big on Bonsai-tron, it's really not that bad.
It's very good. It's very good. Man, I wish we could play Bonsai-tron. Like the fact that he turns into 13 stars with this strat is just like, man, him with Bonsai-tron would be great. But
yes,
yeah, he has such a high potential and just needs a little bit more representation. So I think that's what makes him so comfortably in that tier 1.5 spot for us.
I agree. I think that ought to bring us to the end of the video.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Man, I think like, you know, just going back and just like kind of like summarizing my like experiences in the ATP-3 Type 1 metagame. I mean, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it, especially here at the end of it a little bit more, because like for me, like me as a player, like I don't necessarily enjoy super aggressive, like super control heavy formats. Like it's just not my favorite. Like it's not my favorite metagame. You know, like having to like, you know, in the beginning I've tried Perceptor, it didn't work. I tried like Quake and I actually got bodied, which is actually like a great thing to see in full constructed.
Yeah, I know.
That was a great thing to see. You know, but like it's still like, you know, I've enjoyed exploring it, especially here at the tail end, being able to get like, you know, decent finishes with like Snapdragon decks, with like, you know, Fort Maxx again, being able to explore the format on a different axes that kind of like still allows me to play the game that I enjoy, even if it's a little bit more difficult, was still really enjoyable, and it makes me happy to see, like, even though like I would say like of all the ATP like seasons, ATP-3 season 3 of ATP, in my opinion, felt the most like the least flexible in terms of like archetype diversity. Like there's tons of control archetypes that you could play, as shown by this list alone, and there's tons that we probably haven't even put up here. But like, I mean, just take note of like, you know, I like playing aggro. I love playing aggro decks. I love the aggro mirrors. There are 4 aggro decks in tier 2. And there's not a lot of aggro decks in tier 1.5, you know, but that's just how the meta game shaped up. And it's like, it's, you know, I didn't quite enjoy that spot, but a lot of people do. And it's also a great breath of fresh air compared to the super aggressive wave 5 meta game that we've like still kind of feel reels from to a certain extent, you know?
Absolutely.
Because everything about it. This is like the first time we've seen this since
it was also
right?
The Wave 5 metagame was just in place for so long, right? It was around for like, there was like 6 months of every deck was 35 cards the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was just brutal, and it was and so like we're still reeling a little bit from it. Like, it'd be hard not to, right? But I think that you're gonna see a shift back towards the middle.
Yeah.
With the release of ATP-4. I mean, like,
I think so.
Like, I mean, let's talk about like the ones that are already spoiled, right? Like Herald's looks really solid as an aggressive deck. I guess like an orange aggressive deck. Not even they look like they're pretty bad as an orange black deck. So
they do. Yeah.
Because they just have no health. So like these little rinky dink every attack matters things is like you can't do that. You got to kill a guy, kill a guy, kill a guy.
They're
right?
a premium aggro deck at its core.
Yeah.
For sure.
Rodimus. Both sides of the character. Swinging. You've got, I mean, Starscream, right? Starscream is really more a black pip character than anything, but I think he could go in blue-black or orange-black. And if it was blue-black, that's awesome, because the game really has not had blue-black decks before.
That's such a new archetype to explore.
Yeah. And if he goes into orange-black, is completely different flavor. Being 8 stars really limits whether or not you can actually even be 4 wide, so like that's something to really consider as well, you know? Yeah. Like, maybe it's where sports is doing it anyway. Who knows? Maybe because he's just got the bold tough, you'll just see him in mixed pip decks. Who knows?
Maybe he can be room in any of those like 3 like main archetypes of this game, right? They're so all the legends are just so flexible, and that's also like what makes me excited for them for ATP-4. And a lot of these decks on this tier list, right? Like there is just looking at this tier list right now, there's a lot of decks in a lot of these tiers, and I can pretty much guarantee you that a lot of these decks in these lower tiers will probably get a bump up not just from battle card support, but just from meta shifts, right? We talked about how Seekers is just not very good in the control, especially hand destruction based metagame, but against like a more aggressive like metagame, especially maybe even wider aggro, being able to play almost like this Quake style AoE style of deck, just bump them up to like a great like anti-meta pick. You know, Snapdragon getting opportunism. You know, Living Weapon Megatron potentially seeing a format with like less control, meaning less disarms, meaning more chances to OA and not lose all your P boxes, right? You know.
Yes.
There's all that going on. You know, it's so much to like. I think something to really take away from this, like this is this tier list definitely is like what we want it to be, like a snapshot of like the Titan 1 series as a whole. But like, I mean, each tournament can have its own metagame that could shift these tier lists a whole lot just from each tournament, because that's how diverse a lot of these like the decks that can be played, the characters that people use, the people playing this game still with us is like crazy to think about, right? You know, I think there's just,
man, it really is.
It is nuts, right? I think it's so much to like consider as a whole, and that's what makes it so exciting for me. I love being like, one of my biggest things is I want to be able to like I want to be able to say that I can go to a tournament, every tournament in a season, and play a different deck and have fun. You know, and I think this is something that this tier list shows that is totally possible. Like totally possible.
I've gotten to do that so far, and I've had a really great time. I've even had some pretty good success.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
In ATP-3.
You have.
Aside from Junkion, where I have just been soundly and thoroughly defeated.
We gotta work on you with Junkion. We'll get you there.
I know, man. For some reason, I just like, since the early part of the, I mean, like in ATP, in like the last like 2-3 events, I have really done poorly in Junkion. Okay, I think that we're gonna call it there. This has been an incredible amount of fun. Thank you so much for having me on. I would love to get to do something like this again.
Getting transformyourgame.net, you know. Team members
true.
Right here. Yeah.
It's true. It's two of us. I you know, every time I see that bracket, I pull up and it's got you over there with the BVO and also the TFYG tags on it.
Representing.
Lovely to see. Lovely to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, again, thank you, and thank you to all listening and watching, wherever you are. Hopefully, you found this informative, if not entertaining.
Yeah.
And signing off.
Yeah, signing off. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we hope you stick around for this awesome game to watch more from us and just to see what's going on. All right, everyone, take care.
Amen to that.
Take care, everybody.